You and me, actually, Alex.
Got everyone present and the time is just past 10 o'clock, so we need to open the meeting and get recording started. So we'll just wait for that to happen.
Yeah, just happening.
Okay, we'll open this council meeting for 20th of September and I will begin with karakia. Tue ki runga, tue ki raro, tue ki waho, tue ki roto, tue ki te here tangata, ka rongo te pō, ka rongo te au, haumie, huie, tai e. Thanks everybody and welcome along everyone. I just want to quickly pass now to Andrew Noon, who would like to note the passing of Len Anderson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I think you were all saddened to hear of Len Anderson's passing last weekend. A very special individual, very well respected QC, or now KC, King's Council, based in Dunedin, and yeah, our thoughts are with his wife and family.
So yes, welcome everyone today. I'd like to make a special welcome to members of the public who have joined us today in the gallery for an important council meeting, and also to those public forum speakers who will join us in just a moment. So thanks for being with us today. And also everybody that is watching online as well, because I imagine that we will have a number of people there as well. Welcome along. We do have an apology today, Councillor Gary Kelleher for illness today. Somebody care to move that? Councillor Malcolm, seconded Councillor McCall, all in favour, aye, against, carried. We need to move on with the agenda, so we now get to public forum, and we have 4 speakers today. I'll just read out the list so that those speakers know which order they'll be in. First of all, we have Liz Angelo speaking on City Rise bus services, Pierre Marasti from Extinction Rebellion, Jerry Eckhoff speaking on the Manuhira Kia, I believe, and Nigel Peregrine from Fish and Game also speaking on the Manuhira Kia. So today we need to stick to time, so we're going to have Kylie helping me here just with a bit of a timer to give me a nudge. After 5 minutes you'll get to speak. and then there'll just be a quick session of if there's any questions of clarification. Thank you very much, Liz, and you're welcome to come up the head of the table here and take a seat if that's how you feel most comfortable addressing us. We'll just give you a second to set up. Good morning.
Kylie has sent you an email this morning with exactly what I'm going to talk about. Did you get that? Right. Yeah, thanks. You'd have previously had an email with the comments that people had made about losing their bus service a few years ago. I'll be very quick. I've just got bullet points. The first thing is that obviously we want to reinstate the public transport to Arthur Street South. It does go at the north end, but it's only about 10 houses it covers, and then it goes straight up to Belmouse. The interesting thing is that 70% of Dunedin's population live in Central City. That's over 88,000, and a great deal of them in City Rise South, an estimate of about 7,200. It's perched on a steep hill. There are no shops, cafes, or other facilities. If you want a pint of milk, you go up the hill or down the hill. It's just, there's nothing like it used to be years ago. There are 5 large schools with a total of 2,500 students. You probably all know those schools. And there are 2 childcare centres. The demographics are, they range from renters, families, seniors, guests with Airbnb, tertiary students, business, university, hospital professionals, shift workers, new immigrants, and Wikipedia have got a page on City Rise. The median age is 27 years, and 59% are employed, 37% have a degree. So you can see it's a mixed shifting population. The median income is only 22,000 a year. There's a lot of intensification through property investment. 2GP means that many rent by the room. But people don't want to take a car to the city. It adds to parking and congestion problems, and it's dangerous to walk or drive in the ice and snow. In 2017, the ORC voted to axe the bus service that they've had for years previously. And that went from Broadway, Canongate, Russell Street, Arthur Street South, so it cut off that whole side of the hill. But there is a simple solution. Divert bus 63 right across the city. Currently, 2 buses come down High Street at almost the same time, 61 and 63. So they follow each other to the bus hub. Consequently, the first bus gets most passengers, not the second. However, 1 bus could divert right across the hill to the bus hub. The proposal is that bus 63 divert across the hill. And the result is that a bus service from really Balaclava, the southern motorway, right across to the stadium, you could have a bus going right across the city via the hub. So if you think about the population of City Rise and beyond, you'd be transporting people from Balaclava, Mornington, City Rise, 5 schools, Moana Pool, City Bus Hub, the hospital, which would be a real bonus, the museum, and the university. That would be, there are so many people that live or work at the university or the hospital living in City Rise. I really think the ORC should be taking every opportunity to encourage as many people as possible to use public transport now and in the future. And you agreed on this at the Meet the Candidates meetings. There was a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of hands went up. So I'm also asking, please don't push this community forum to one side. I ask you to make this an agenda item, probably not today, but near soon, and implement this as soon as possible, because it would be inexpensive and a real solution to a 7-year problem. And City Rise is not going to go away. In fact, it's going to increase. There's building developments going on now. So there you are. That's my 5 minutes worth.
Thank you very much. Well, we have got some points clarification. We'll start with Councillor Weir.
Thanks for coming in, Liz. And I
That's
think,
fine. I'm a little bit deaf, so you could speak
sorry,
up.
I do think if you look at the maps of the routes, there is a wee bit of a gap in the map
Yes.
around that city rise
Yes.
area. I'm wondering though if you were designing a route from scratch, for example, rather than diverting another one, would that be where it would follow, or would it be something slightly different in your head?
I don't know. I mean, a lot of people say to me, oh, we'd love the old bus route back. I'm not sure that that's the solution, but I think this actually is an advantage for a lot of people, not just the people that live in the city rise.
Okay, thank you. Kate?
This is a question for the CEO, really. I don't know, I can't find when our next PAT meeting is in my calendar, but I'm just wondering, how do we ensure that we just get a response for this, which seems,
I've noted to do that.
Well, I'll take that content from Liz back to the transport team and just understand how that process,
thank you.
yeah,
That'd be great.
when it would come, when the appropriate time to bring something like that back would be.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you. Hey, I think we've come to the end of the questions. Thank you so much, Liz, for appearing in person today. Appreciate
So,
it.
can I just ask, do you see a need for public transport in city
We
rise?
can't answer
answer that?
questions
No.
from, that's not the format, unfortunately, of
Okay,
this.
well,
Yeah,
I was
it's a
as
chance for you to
quick as
speak
I could
to
be
us.
anyway.
But
Thank
we
you.
do appreciate that. Thank you. All right, Pierre, welcome. Hey, Alexa, welcome, Pierre.
Globally, last month was the hottest month of August we ever experienced, making the last 3 months the warmest on record. These dramatic temperatures keep generating extreme weather events. Heat waves, hurricanes, and desert floods in the US, floods in Brazil, floods in Hong Kong, floods and heat waves in Europe. With Greece being especially affected, they went through the largest wildfire in European history, followed by 1.5 years worth of rain in 18 hours. The same storm system that ravaged Greece also killed people in Turkey and in Bulgaria before heading to Libya, where it collapsed 2 dams, killing thousands. These events are terrible. They are shocking and they give us an emotional response. But to really understand the systemic dangers humanity is facing from climate change, we need to step back and look at the big picture. For example, in 2022 alone, heat waves killed 61,000 Europeans. The human body doesn't like excessive heat, and this trend will keep worsening globally as temperatures increase. Heat also affects productivity and quality of life. Another effect of our rising temperatures is that it increases our water needs, not just to drink, but also for agriculture and even for the industry. By the end of this decade, in 6 years, it is expected that global water demand will outstrip supply by 40%. New Zealand is, of course, also affected, and even after a year of the worst flooding events in our history, Wellington is already planning for water shortages this summer. A couple of years ago, it was Auckland that almost ran out of water, and our farmers have increasingly suffered from droughts in the last decades. This trend will not reverse, but we can still stop it from worsening out of control. Another large-scale impact is that through the combination of warming temperatures, scarcity of fresh water, pollution, soil degradation, and biodiversity loss, we see an acceleration of desertification. In 2021, desertification was already affecting the well-being of 3.2 billion humans. Beyond the obvious problem of not being able to farm in a desert, desertification promotes the emergence of new diseases jumping from animals to humans. It also causes population displacement, creating tensions and conflicts. Then there are the effects of climate heating on our food production. Not enough water affects agricultural yield, and too much water also affects agricultural yield. A striking example of how fragile our food systems are is the developing global rice shortage. While China has seen its rice production impacted by floods, the largest rice exporter, India, banned the export of this staple as it is impacted by droughts. half of the world's population depends on rice for their diet. You can see a pattern emerging from these few examples of the global impacts of climate change. Rising temperatures are affecting our health and are affecting our food supply. Add to that the cost of constant damages to properties and infrastructure, and on top of its human toll, the economic toll of the crisis becomes obvious. All these tensions created by constant disasters and climate-induced economic struggles are straining the cohesion of our societies. The climate crisis doesn't only create dangers for individuals, but also for democracies, something worth keeping in mind during this electoral period. A stable climate is important for democracies to strive, and striving democracies are important to enable the changes needed to stabilize our climate. With the elections coming soon, this month we are simply asking you, like for any other responsible citizens, to vote with the climate in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Pierre. Are there any questions or clarification?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, next up we have Jerry Eckhoff, who is joining us online. So just muted at the moment, Jerry. Can we unmute him at our end, maybe? We'll see if we can unmute you. Yep, okay. Welcome, Jerry.
That might,
Yep, you're all good and we can hear you.
it's working for me at this end, I think.
Brilliant, working for us as well. Whenever you're ready, just off. Yep.
Okay, thank you. As you probably know, Gretchen, I'm far rather front up at a meeting than talk through an electronic medium, but a 5 hours round trip is not on for a 5-minute presentation, but it is what it is. Can I start just by saying I originally thought that the debate over this river was really a great example of the tragedy of the commons. But on reflection, it clearly isn't, because the Menehirakia River has been, despite difficulties over many years, I guess, with dry seasons, and we've just heard a previous speaker talk about that reality on a different subject, of course, but the Menehirakia River has been extremely well managed, as indeed has the Taieri and the Lindis, despite difficulties. I don't pretend that there's not difficulties with it, but I think we have to recognize that. Now I see the council is seeking to impose what I can only describe as a failed process on us all, just as the process on the Lindis failed, and I think it's inevitable that the process on the Menehirakia will fail as well. Actually, the discussion, in my view, on the future of this river should not just be about the river, but I know what the minister has required and said it's all about the health of the river. In fact, and I've written about this, and hopefully one or two of you might have read, that it's actually about the communities. We hear so much these days about the well-being of communities. That's what this debate really is about. It's not about the farmers, it's not about the dairy guys or the sheep or beef. It's about the wider community. It's about the local people, it's about the shops, the garage, the engineering shops, the pubs, the bowling green, the golf club, all water users. So it's about really the social impacts that your decision is going to make on the historical, the cultural impacts that frankly the minister has completely ignored. But can I make this point to the councillors? You as our representatives can't, in my view, ignore this reality. I suspect many of you will, but I hope that is not the case. And I also make the point, and that I, and along with hundreds and possibly thousands of others in this area, are to be disenfranchised this day because the councillor that I voted for and wanted to speak for me, and I guess the other people thought the same way, is not allowed to vote, despite the fact that I have just heard that he's on he's sick leave or is not well. Even if he was there, he would not be allowed to speak today, as I understand it. And that anomaly just is, despite the Localism Act that has worked so well in the UK, It's just been ignored in this country, which is not your responsibility. I fully accept that. But I want to draw your attention as much as possible to the question of captured water versus free running water. And no mention is made of that important distinction in the paper before the council today, which I find quite unbelievable. Captured water behind the dam is given special legislative treatment in legislation for electricity generation, but not for food generation. I can only wonder why. Should this paper that you will be discussing later on be accepted or noted without amendment, you need to understand that it will have far-reaching consequences. Some would even say quite disastrous consequences. Yet no councillor will bear any individual responsibility for whatever is going and what I know is going to happen. Please don't insult me by believing that, oh, well, there's a consultative process which the council will endure, choose that word correctly, over the coming months. Yet I know that little will change after consultation. And I think we all know that. And I say that from 9 years of experience with the council. But I can say that without any equivocation, that should this report be adopted, and what is it, June or July of next year, the final notification, I think the consequences will be far beyond people's understanding. And I say that with not rhetoric or empty rhetoric. I know what is likely to happen or what will happen. I note that you indicate that only those who are prepared to increase efficient use of water will receive an allocation for extraction. Almost in the same breath, you say that permits are a very short term and may be reduced into the near future to meet the demands of the river. So please tell me, or think about at least, who will invest in extra water efficiency under those terms? Millions of dollars for centre permits, for power to drive all these things. Finally, a plea that I've made for so many years now to the council to actually lead on its responsibility for willow contamination and the resulting water extraction, which is massive in high summer. Will you exercise your responsibility as Environment Canterbury has done on the Hekataramia, just by one example, or will you continue to ignore this wilding tree problem? You say the river is of regional significance. That is the case. Then a general rate to combat willows should be a first step in genuinely restoring the health of the river. And I've had significant conversations with one of the leading individuals in the South Island, worked for DOC for 35 years, and I think he's my new best friend, actually. We had a wonderful conversation of just what a magnificent difference it can make to rivers if we take the bull by the horns and grasp this nettle. Councillors, as you know, there's so much more than I can just garble through this as quickly as possible within the 5 minutes.
We've just
to spare sometimes some of the language that we've lost, and we will lose. What is it? Steep reduction in profitability in the farming in this area. I never thought I'd be asked to speak on it. Well, I'm asking myself to speak on these issues. I didn't think this was possible, but it is. So if you've got time for questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Eckhoff. Appreciate you coming along and speaking to us. So I'll just check if there are any questions. No, there does not seem to be, but yeah, we do appreciate you coming along, and it's actually really easy and really clear to see you on the screen speaking. So it's a good way of doing it. Thank you. Next up, we have Nigel Peregrine.
Right, good morning.
Welcome.
Right, if I just bounce in?
Yeah, go for it.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. Morning staff, councillors, people in the gallery. Many of you know me. My name is Nigel Paragreen. I'm the Environmental Officer for the Otago Fish and Game Council. I speak on their behalf today. I'm speaking to you to ask that you be brave leaders. This proposal for a minimum flow in the Manuharakia is not appropriate and you should not adopt it. You should instead ask staff to come back urgently with an alternative. I say that with a genuinely heavy heart. Since the Skelton report, I have thought the ORC was turning a page. From the outside, I saw an organisation which recognised it had failed in implementing the deemed permit process and had set about trying to do better. I respect that immensely and have been vocal about it. This proposal you have in front of you seems out of character. It's more akin to the ORC of old. It'd see 17 years worth of delay between now and when a meaningful minimum flow is returned to the river. The ecological and hydrological advice you have on hand states the minimum flow should be well above 900 and 1200 litres a second. To wait 17 years to achieve meaningful flow is unreasonably prolongs the damage to the river. I can't see how this proposal elevates the mana of the Manuharakia or the people who connect with it. If you think of the big picture, this proposal would mean that a meaningful flow is returned to the river 49 years after the deemed permits were determined to be inappropriate. For those who think a minimum flow of 2,500 litres per second is not a compromise, remember that this flow is estimated to have occurred naturally just 0.16% of the time. That's a 1 in 25 year low flow. Furthermore, the proposal suggests that the enormous allocation set by deemed permit should also be left untouched. That allocation is 8 times the low flows physically available in the river. This is to be dealt with at some unknown time, leaving us all without certainty. I also want to speak on species interaction. The proposal places a huge weight on the issue by holding the restoration of the river's flow hostage until fish barriers are built. The proposal tied species interaction to the minimum flow at the last minute without discussion and simplifies the issue to the point of being misleading. It suggests that water is generally the enemy of native fish. The ecology advice in front of you is that for most species, returning water to the river will make things better. The interaction I assume the proposal is alluding to is specific between non-migratory galaxids and predators. The interaction of these populations doesn't occur in main stems. They're mostly in small tributaries where they are more affected by residual rather than minimum flows. To be clear, this is an important issue for anglers and hunters, and they want to be part of the solution. Otago Fish and Game has a species interaction management policy. We've had one for years. It says we want to work with parties to resolve species interaction issues while managing the impacts on fisheries. We regularly provide authorizations to remove sports fish for this purpose and have been involved in and supportive of fish barriers in the Manuharakia. The proposal is even more disappointing for me because it acts as if the regional council is the sole party responsible for the issue. It is not. There are 4 parties with responsibility to manage the species involved here: Mana Whenua, DOC, Fish and Game, the regional council. Of 4 sets of statutory direction that need to be considered and worked through in managing the species, some of it conflicting. In the past years, these 4 parties have been developing a joint process which would see them work together to identify places where intervention is required and act on it. Fish and Game is proposing to include this in the RPS, and that is supported by the ORC's own experts, as well as those from DOC and Mana Whenua. One of the reasons I know this system will work is because we've already done it, and we've done it in the Manuharakia. As part of the MRG process, people from Fish and Game, Akaha, Te Ara Marama, DOC and COES sat down with ORC staff, pulled up a map of the catchment and talked through species interaction issues. On that day, there was no disagreement. Every potential project that came up either had support from all in the room or could be positively progressed with future discussions. Unfortunately, despite our best efforts to keep that group alive, the discussions never went anywhere. Working together to resolve species interaction is a point which is so wildly pragmatic to me that I'm astonished it hasn't come together. As far as I can tell, the statutory managers aren't far apart on the issues. They're extremely well aligned. If we were to all approach the issue in good faith with a consensus mindset, I'm certain we would find solutions with longevity. Looking again to the big picture, this decision you've been asked to make today is a noting decision. It's an opportunity for you as leaders to provide direction to your communities, to our communities. I urge that you take this opportunity seriously. Do not adopt this proposal. Ask staff to come back urgently with an alternative that will achieve at least the following 3 things. Firstly, create a meaningful restoration of flow from at least
5 minutes,
2030.
Nigel, just round off.
I
Yeah,
will,
thank you.
preferably earlier. Secondly, manage catchment allocation as part of the notified plan, or at least provide strong direction on how it will be managed in future. Thirdly, engage genuinely and in good faith with other statutory managers to find consensus decisions on addressing species interactions. I'm going to leave you with one anecdote. I was 2 years old when the RMA was passed and its sunset clause, with its sunset clause for deemed permit. As an adult, I stood in front of this council, I stood in front of the Environment Court, I stood in front of many hearings to argue for it to be implemented as it had been intended. I have a 1-year-old daughter. She'll be an adult by the time the flows in the Menehira are restored. But the long delay with little action and then a sudden jump to meaningful flows is the same pattern we saw in the deemed permit process. If you adopt this proposal, it's entirely possible my daughter will be sitting here in nearly 2 decades' time as an adult, fighting to implement this plan as intended. An intergenerational plan should not pass the responsibility onto future generations. A proper intergenerational plan would see us take meaningful action now to build a solid foundation for our future, for our children. They should see through our work and not do it for us. Thank you.
Any points of clarification? Kate and then Elliot.
Thank you, Nigel. Just clarification about the contributions of Fish and Game, and I appreciate talking and getting consensus as one as a statutory manager. What is the deep pockets of the hunters and the fishers to do some of the infrastructure that's suggested is needed in the report? And we've had some numbers given to us at Thompson's Creek and how much investment's required for these things. I'm not quite sure if they're all the same.
We pretty much have to run everything on the smell of an oily rag. I mean, we don't have any government funding. Everything that we do is funded from license holder fees. So that said, we do have projects in our current work plan where we're anticipating doing work, say on species interaction, say trout removal or trout relocation. We are open to discussions about resourcing as part of that group of 4, and I would love to see that happen.
Okay, Elliot.
I was just wondering if you could repeat that first recommendation.
Yeah, sorry. I did blast through them. The first recommendation was create a meaningful restoration of flow from at least 2030, preferably earlier.
Tim.
Nigel, thanks for coming along. Can I just clarify, is this Fish and Game's viewpoint or your own personal viewpoint that you're presenting?
I'm speaking on behalf of the Otago Fishing Game Council.
Okay. Look, the other thing I was just interested in was obviously your beef is around the implementation process. How do you feel about the proposed minimum flows? Do you think they're okay?
The logic of the 2.5 cubic flow, I think, as an initial read of the evidence that we have on hand, sounds pretty helpful. I'm not certain how we get to 900 and 1200 and how that is justified in the current policy framework that we have to deal with, and that is essentially one of our main problems.
Okay, we've come to the end of our time allocated for public forum. So just want to reiterate to everyone that has come along to speak that we do really appreciate public forum. That's an important process, and thank you for coming in person. Thank you very much.
Thank you, I really appreciate it.
Right, so we have next confirmation of agenda, and I would like to move that the addition of 2 papers, 8.1 Land and Water Regional Plan, noting policy for direction for Manuhirakia, 3.3 Service Procurement of Fleet Tracking System, which will be public excluded. Proposed to be. Presentation from Port Otago Chief Executive Kevin Wonders on Port Otago Limited Annual Report. Be accepted to this agenda for this meeting, and the reason that they can't be carried over to another meeting, we need to state the reason as well, understanding orders. Firstly, for the Manuhirakia, due to the upcoming public consultation on the Manuhirakia paper, it's important that we consider that matter today. The second one is procurement timing for the second, that second matter, fleet tracking system. And the presentation from the port was omitted from the agenda when it was finalised, but presenting the annual report is an important matter, and the port is ready to do that today. So I have moved those three. Somebody care to second? Yep, Councillor Malcolm is seconding. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. So with that in mind then, we have 8.1 now being the Manuhira Kia. I'm just going to outline how I propose to run the day timing wise as well. So we're at this stage planning to have this paper, and then we're going to have a short break, I think, after that, and move on to all of these other papers and a public excluded section. So welcome to Anita and to Tom. Everyone from councillors will have noted that this paper is in diligent, and if you haven't been able to find it, we can point you in the direction of that, but I imagine everyone has. Otherwise, this paper is on the website publicly. Now, I'm just going to check as well, sorry, we've still got Councillor Eckhoff here in our meeting this way, and that's fine. Oh, sorry, not councillor. I'm used to calling him Councillor Eckhoff from the past, a long time ago. We have got Mr. Eckhoff, and that's okay. He could.
It's totally public.
Yeah, oh, true. Yes, that would work. Yep, thanks.
I think these ones, it's in the resource centre because.
It's in the resource centre, it's not,
Yeah.
it's not on the council.
Yeah, just double checking everyone's got what they need. Yep. Oh gosh, sorry guys, we do need to do that, thanks. I was straight into it when we do need to, so thank you. We absolutely need to do that. So thanks for coming forward. We have got some important matters to do. We need to remind people that the declarations of interest need to be adhered to, and that they are present publicly there on our website. If anyone wants to declare any during the meeting, then just signal that to me. Confirmation of minutes, 23rd of August. Does somebody care to move those true and accurate? Councillor Noon, seconded. Count.
Just with a slight note that the way they're written shows that Councillor Noon had left the meeting after the vote, after STV, when he left during it and before the vote. So
Right,
it should just be moved where
just
he.
need to amend that.
Yeah.
Councillor Noon wasn't there for the vote, he left prior to that. Yep.
It's very minor, but I'm sorry.
No, that's important. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Seconded was Councillor Somerville. Yeah, all in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Yes, that was that. I think I may have missed the actions register there, did I?
Sorry, Chair.
Oh no, actions is next.
We've got a few hiccups trying to get these papers.
Okay, that's okay. We can deal with
Thank you,
that.
Chair.
I was just about to move on to the actions register, and then while you're sorting that out. Yeah. So we're going to move on for the actions. We have got a few there that are due. So yeah, we've just got, we haven't ticked off as done the signing on to the free fares and releasing a public statement about that. So I understand Chief Executive Richard here is going to just check on that and come back to us at the next meeting. Yeah. Yeah, we're pretty sure we have done that, but we'll double check that and take it off if so. What else have we got?
And then the next action around the feasibility of free off-peak public transport has been almost superseded by the feasibility business case, which we're discussing as part of the LTP. So we'll close that one off and deal as part of that discussion.
Yeah, we've got wellbeing baseline report to be presented to the mayoral forum as well, which it's not on the agenda for this time, but we can look at that into the near future. And the other one is just by the 19th of September, advising the right of electors to demand a poll on the electoral system. So that one is done and we can tick that one off. Thank you. So that is the updates on the due ones. So we've had a mover. Sorry,
Oh, yes.
Councillor
I was just gonna
McCall.
say, I think the second one around the council mark review and the actions taken, I think it probably should read February 2024 as opposed to 2023.
Probably.
Yeah, perhaps would be really
Right,
efficient. Eh?
thanks. Well, got that one, Kylie. Thank you. Okay, somebody care to second then? Tim, all in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thanks. And now, everyone, do you feel organised for Manuhera Key? Got what you need? Yeah? Fantastic. Okay, so we have got the paper here in front of us. We've got Anita and we've got Tom to answer questions in the first section of how we handle the meeting. So yeah, this is an important moment, but it's an important moment for us to all remember that this is an opportunity to note staff policy recommendations. It's not a chance to lock in policy today. Any policy noted today will obviously be subject to consultation, and there's a couple of ways that that will happen. So there will be the pre-formal notification consultation that's going to happen, and one of those will be a drop-in session on the 27th of October in Ophir, and we also will have formal consultation as well once this is actually notified mid next year. So this is where we are at the moment in terms of a staff recommendation after a lot of consideration, and it's around not just flow. This is about water quantity and quality, as your paper clearly points out. There's on the first page there a whole range of different policy provisions that it incorporates. And then there's also information there around where that guidance has come from. So all of the work that's gone in behind the recommendations. So I'm not going to speak for any longer because it's certainly not about me as the chair of the meeting today. I'm going to hand over to Anita and whether or not there's anything else you wanted to introduce. And then we're going to have questions and then we'll head into debate. Thank you.
Yeah, so through the chair, so thank you. And we will just take the paper as read. Tom and I are here to answer questions, but we've also got some of our other awesome staff that can answer some of the other questions we can't. I think we've just kicked off engagement for the land water plan. So those of us that were in Otago on Monday or Dunedin on Tuesday will realise that this engagement round is an opportunity for us to refine what we're doing. We've got some really good feedback and some changes that we need to make, and it's the same process for the Manuhera Kia. In August 2021, we were asking you to lock in the numbers that would go into the plan. This is asking you to confirm a package of provisions across quality and quantity for us to have that engagement. And so it is a slightly different process. I don't think that I need to say anything else, but we are happy to answer any questions. Yeah, we'll leave it. Yeah.
Hey, we've got lots of hands going up for questions already. So the first one was Councillor Laws, then McCall, then Wilson.
Thank you. I've got some questions from the community that have come in, so they've come through me. So if I might.
Yes.
Thank you. And given that we're on, it's a good way to answer those. The regional policy statement presented a deadline for the Manuhera here of 2050. Why is the IRC now setting 2040 as the date for the ideal minimum flow?
Sure. So through the chair, so the 2040 date is to allow that flow to come in, and then for the river, for the health of the river to recover from that flow. So it's allowing some time. What we have discussed previously is that number is a policy decision, that data is a policy decision, not a science decision. So it's not locked in. That is just a period of time that we think is appropriate to get to the 2050 outcome.
Will it take 10 years?
We don't know.
Second question is, the science material doesn't appear to be in public, although I went to the committee on the 22nd. This is to do with 2,500. Why isn't the mainstream habitat table for the Manihira in this summary? And how does the Manihira compare to the MPSFM bottom lines and the band that the LRC is aiming for?
So in terms of the reports, they are going up online. There has been a slight delay due to staff illness, and we have been sending those out, but I'm hopeful that they are making their way out to people. I'm just getting some confirmation that they are making their way out and they will go up online. In terms of the actual ecological detail, I'll pass over to Tom.
So the main report and table did come to the committee and is online. That report summarises a lot of other detailed reports. Those detailed reports are not yet online, but should be done today, and have been shared. I listened to the first part of your question, but I think I've missed the point of your second part.
No, that's all right. So what you're essentially saying that's there,
yeah,
you're going to put it up online today or as soon to today as it's possible.
The summary report has been online for some time,
yeah.
But the detailed reports specifically beneath them will be up online today.
The metering on discharges is a phrase that looks wise, but does it include the flood bywash on weirs and dams, clean water from small hydro schemes, flowing back into creeks, etc.?
So that is a good point, and we believe it is wise to meter as much as possible. There are some discharges back to the environment that would be very, very challenging to meter appropriately, so flood bywash, etc. But where practical and where possible to measure flows into and out of the river system, I think it would be certainly helpful in any further considerations of minimum flow in future years and in terms of allocation review to have that metering in place. There will always be gaps in our knowledge and knowledge set and information. So measuring some types of discharge will be quite challenging to do. But like I said, anything that's practical to measure, we think it would be wise to and would certainly help this conversation with both the community and with decision makers moving forward.
And we'd be looking for those examples from the community of where it's not practical to meter those discharges. That's the point of this engagement, is to get that feedback so we can refine down.
The fish barriers on the tributaries that you're recommending, who's responsible to install and then maintain these? Are Fish and Game going to consent to build and maintain these? And what if the barriers aren't functioning? Does the minimum flow still go up?
So I'll answer that one. So there's a live question about who pays for the fish barriers that we haven't resolved at this point in time. All we've said is that the plan will require them, probably through a policy rather than a rule. And then there's another piece of work that we need to do as a council in terms of how that happens.
One of the key reasons for the timings you see there is that there is quite a lot of work to do in terms of just organising logistics and understanding who might do what in that picture. And I think in the public forum you heard Mr. Peregrine talk to that. We'd be starting from a conversation, starting with some monitoring and measurement and common understanding, and then moving through to decision making and who might pay and how installation might occur and what the right timing might be and all of that sort of thing.
How long do you anticipate that timing to be before a decision presumably comes to governance to be signed off on those?
I don't think that will happen before the plan notification. It will start, but it won't have resolved itself.
Recommendation M, no new water. that seems to be at odds with O, which is more enabling flow harvesting. How does that work?
Yeah, good point. No new primary water to be allocated, and that's consistent with the NPS that says we've got to phase out over allocation. O is about harvesting high flows, so we can clarify that they are two different things. One is the primary flow, so instantaneous rate of take, and then the O is relating to the higher flows.
So that will be clarified.
Yeah. it's
We'll
an
clarify that
important point.
as part of engagement.
It's confusing. Yeah. Yeah.
In section R, or the recommendation R, the dam take limits are included in the wider catchment. What does that mean? Aren't they already?
So that means they'll have the same run of the river minimum flow on them. That's the proposal for all of Otago.
Okay. And finally, on recommendation S, how could environmental limits or take limits apply to a farmer's dam anyway? And why is this mentioned?
And that's not related to farmers' dams. And that's, again, that's a region-wide provisions for all of our off-stream reservoirs. And provided they're not hydrologically connected, then we won't be managing them through flows or takes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McCall.
Oh, yes, Madam Chair. Not exactly a question, but I'd just like to signal a desire to put forward a motion at the appropriate time.
Yeah, I'll keep that in mind. No questions then, Councillor McCall? No.
Oh, no, not
Okay,
right,
Councillor
no.
Wilson.
Some of my questions have been covered, but it's I'm finding it hard to understand how we can consult when we don't know who's going to cover the costs of the metering and what sort of metering it is, as well as actually taking that question of Councillor Laws slightly further, if that's possible. Is it the regulation type monitoring that you wanted, which is 15 seconds telemetered, sorry, 15 minutes telemetered, that you're expecting that monitoring to be at? And do we have to detail that? But to go out for consultation without understanding who's going to pay for that is a really awkward thing, in the same way as the fish barrier costs is really awkward to consult on.
So there are, the RMA has some environmental monitoring and reporting requirements for meters, and there are, we just had to chat with Simon and Joe and Alex before, so there are quite a few meters already on. As people get consent, they'll get requirements for additional meters. They are those limited meters. So and it would be a consent holder's obligation to pay for those.
And so that's really clear. So to follow those two questions, I think Councillor Laws asked about, the metering is going to be a requirement, and it's over and above the NPSFM at the moment, because they're required on takes, but then out of the stream, we're adding a layer and requiring the users in those areas to also do discharges.
That's right.
Where it's practical. Would you mind, because of the motions that we've got, that is better articulated in 3 in those things of consultation, and that's not as clear? So there are RMA quality of that type that we're going to be requiring the metering, because that's important, and that it will be at the cost of the user.
We don't, if you want to clarify the recommendations, that's fine.
I mean, I just think it's helpful to get that understanding from the fish barriers. We don't know who's going to pay for them yet, and that's moot. There could be a number of players in there. Do we know what sort of costs we're looking? I mean, I'm watering some of those costs in the Thompson's Gorge. Appreciate that.
So I did have a conversation with some staff about how many and how much, roughly. I understand 4 to 5 tributaries, and I had thought, based on Thompson's Creek, that would be around about $1 million. I understand they're not that hefty, $150,000 to $200,000.
So $1 million
on
each.
What you do each.
Possibly $1 million in total for.
Yes, for the tributaries. But
I think we've got to
that's
be careful
based on very
putting it up on
hypotheticals.
anything.
Yeah.
We're signalling that there's a lot of work needing to be done to understand where it's appropriate, what might actually be required. The signals there that in order to manage this and get the outcomes we're seeking, that is a tool we would have to look at. I would be very hesitant to be putting any, which is why there are no numbers on it currently, but understanding that there is potential for a cost there. And you're right, Kate, there is no indication on who would pay yet, because I think we need to understand the issue a bit better.
Well, and that takes me, I'm going to miss out I think the science report was really clear about the ecological risks of upping the rate. That it's not a perfect model yet. And I totally appreciate that we're investing in trying to improve the model. But I suppose the only thing that's stopping us going to the 2.5 at the moment is the lack of fish barriers in this suggestion, rather than reverse ecological results that we don't want to see.
There is a bit more than that. So fish barriers are really important.
Yeah.
Fish barriers and the protection of pockets of threatened fish species is an important consideration. The other really important consideration is the effect of a high minimum flow with high allocation as well. What you will effectively see if you brought in a minimum flow in the order of 2,500 litres a second quickly, without removing or reducing the amount of primary allocation available, you would see the river potentially flatline at 2,500 litres a second for a very, 2,500 cubic metres a second for a very substantial period of the year, which would have quite substantial ecological effects in terms of life cycle of a number of species within the river. So working through a process of metering, review of allocation, and the associated conversations with community and consent holders as one of the key drivers for the dates that we've got in front of us, alongside managing fish passage and other elements.
The last question is and I totally appreciate that staff are in a really difficult position here, because it's 12 of us making decisions, or 11 of us in this case, and going and working with the community. Now, I think we've all probably had interaction with community members, and thank you to Jerry for his submission about the social cost here as well. I'm hoping that we're going to be in a place to work with the community for solutions, both on potentially storage, on alternative water sources, and working out how change happens. That isn't covered in here. I understand why. I'm wondering, and perhaps through you, Chair, the ability to put a resolution in there that makes clearly that we will be, this isn't the end for us, we want to be walking potentially. And I don't know what my other colleagues think about that, but we can't say what the answer is yet.
Yeah, it's a difficult resolution to probably shape up at this point. Obviously, we do need to work with our communities across Otago. We've got a number of FMUs across Otago. We will obviously want to be working with community in a range of different manners. We've got LTP planning coming up at the moment. So specifying that we're going to work with our communities on water issues, I don't think is needed at this point, but it's just me. Obviously, we're going to work with communities.
Yeah, and I certainly don't want to get into debate yet. I suppose my question is, what isn't acknowledged in this report, although it is acknowledged well in the science report, is that there's been a huge contribution already in costs from the community in developing the model, and that we can't do the science by ourselves, and to do this we need to keep working with the community. And I think if we're going to make progress, it has to be with the community, and I think we can't leave it out of the report somehow, and it's not in there at the moment.
I think my advice on that is the purpose of this report again is policy. And I actually understand what you're saying, Kate. I think it's consistent with the conversations we're having, as Gretchen said, regionally on a number of issues, and this is obviously one that has a lot of focus. But the role of the purpose of this paper to get some direction for consultation, your suggestion is while I understand it, is a little bit outside the scope, but it's good in a public forum with people to hear that your point of view, noting there needs to be council consensus on this. Is that there is an opportunity for us to continue working with the community on both the science and any implementation of this in terms of water quantity, but also other issues we've got regionally, and I think we've started to have some of those discussions in terms of the LTP, and there's further discussions to have down the post consultation when we're getting closer to final direction. May be an opportunity for council collectively to indicate where it sits in terms of the support for implementation of various, but my advice would be not as part of this paper.
Thank you. I've got a list of people. Oh,
Thank you.
sorry.
No. Thank you for.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Agree that it's important to raise in the public forum and appreciate your questions. I was just getting these all down. So the next person then is Councillor Forbes.
Kia ora, thank you. My questions are all around, I've got about 5 or 6, all around why it's taking so long to address the issue of a river not having enough water to be healthy. So I'm starting with, why are we starting at only 900 litres per second when this is effectively no increase at all at the moment, or no increase on current BAU, which is managed by the catchment groups, as managed by the catchment groups now. Why are we starting so long?
So we've suggested 900 at notification just to lock in that existing pattern, that existing flow, so it can't drop below that.
There's the reason, thank you. I don't need your answer to, Michael. Why not start on 1200 by 2026?
Yeah, so the reason that 1200 is at 2030 is because that's when the bulk of the consents come in, and then we can impose it.
So it's a practical piece.
Yeah, even with 2030, and I'm not going to look at jokes, I know what she'll do. We are going to have to do a consent review alongside that, and we've spent a lot of time telling you how challenging consent reviews are, and now we're promoting one. But for this river and this set of circumstances, we think it's the right combination of things to do. So there's a very practical element to that. It gets most of the consents in and operating under that flow.
So it's nothing to do with the science.
No.
Why the big gap with no steps from 2030 to 2040?
We didn't think that having steps in where people would have to continually adjust and modify their infrastructure was worth the gain. So we see the sharpest ecological benefit at the start, moving to 1200, and then we get the other jump a bit later on. And again, that 2040 time is not a scientific number, it's a policy number. It can move one way or the other, but we didn't think putting additional steps in there was that beneficial.
So not that beneficial for the river, but I'll tell you what that indicates to me, and I'd like to hear your response on it. That indicates to me that we're not expecting actually any great change in practice from the people who abstract from the river, that we're just finding other ways for them to do that so that they can continue with exactly the same practices they always have.
A question, sorry, just
That's
maybe
the,
frame it as a
I want to
question.
test that, because that's what that tells me.
I think we're expecting significant change in practice by 2040. And when I say significant change, I mean significant infrastructure development and repurposing, or for instance, potentially seeking of additional water sources, which are all substantial tasks and require substantial investment. Asking for interim steps and tasks that may require solutions that they don't then fall in the final infrastructure package for 2040 feels like it puts in an onus and pressure on people who are having to change substantially for 2040 water users unduly. And when we look at the ecology, we do get significant gains for the river as we move to 1200. And those gains do continue to be acquired as you move up the flow profile or up that flow rate, however, not at the same rate. And that's the broad logic for no additional steps in between.
That answers my question, thank you. The maximum abstraction of 32,000 litres per second seems really, really high. We just heard Nigel tell us that's 8 times enough. How does that equate with a healthy river, getting more water back?
Yeah, so this is one that feels counterintuitive to me as well. The reason that, and 32 is a bit of a nominal number. What we've said is it needs to be higher than the actual allocation so that people can reconsent based on their actual use because of the over allocation provisions in the NPS. So this was a discussion from our legal counsel. So it doesn't need to be 32, but it needs to be above what's taken, or else we can't reconsent and we can't deal with the allocation conversation until we have the meters in place. So the number is a little bit nominal, but we've used 32 because that's the number that we know we talk a lot about in the Manhurikia in terms of paid for allocation. It could be 28 or 24, but it just needs to be higher to allow that reconsenting to happen.
So in a practical sense, if a water user was itching to come in and reconsent their practice and make investments early, and their viewpoint was they wanted to do their bit early, having that number there allows us as a consenting authority to enable them to go through that process. If you had a number that was smaller than what is currently taken, that would be a difficult thing to do.
And if we had really good certainty around takes, retakes and discharges, we could set that number lower, but because we don't, that's why it's kind of artificially high.
Okay, so given all these practical things, can we actually say that we've applied the principles of Te Mana o Te Wai in their correct priority orders?
Yes. From a policy point of view, I believe this adheres to the MPSFM. There's also, the requirement to set a long-term vision and then a pathway to get there. So we believe this is a good place to start the conversation with the community.
It's the start of the conversation. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Murphy.
Yeah, actually, quite a few of my questions have been covered in terms of the implementation period. The remaining question I do have, though, is the establishment of the 1,200 litres per second minimum flow 2030. Is this conditional on the trout barriers being established in the tributaries? If we don't have them by 2030, we'll still have a 1,200 litre minimum flow. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So the 1,200 is for us is the limit, and we don't go beyond 1,200 until the fish barriers are in place. So 1,200 happens at 2030, irrespective of whether the barriers are in place.
Okay, so what is actually holding up the implementation of the 1,200 litres per second is the consenting process. Is that what it is? Okay.
There's just the practical process of if we have to call all of the consents in, there's a chance that we won't have finished that process by the time 2030 comes around anyway, and we can do it in a more straightforward way by picking up the bulk of the consents when they come in.
Okay.
And if I may, it's not that we're not efficient, it's just that those are processes that do have timeframes with them, and the consents do have expiry dates. And we do see that most people, it is about 18 months before a consent expires that they are looking to come in, unless there's some form of change or a thing that means that they will come in a bit earlier, but most wait until their consent is looking to expire. So that's a general approach to people with those consents.
Thank you.
Well done. Okay. I had your hand up before, Councillor Weary. So, yep, thanks.
3 questions, you guys. The first one was touching on a response you had earlier about and correct me if my interpretation's wrong, but that you sort of said that like a flatlined 2.5 humex would be ecologically worse than bringing in a limit, or than having those lower limits when there's so many consents and it dipping down below that.
Has the potential to be ecologically worse.
So assuming there were like fish barriers and stuff, how?
So if you look at the life cycle of invertebrates and other bits and pieces, they typically thrive under conditions that have some flow variability. You would see no flow variability based on our modelling for substantial parts of the year, which means no fish food and means the ecosystem struggles.
So that would outweigh the benefits of that higher flow.
Yeah, broadly, hard to put absolutes on it, but there's substantial risk associated with giving effect to that sort of type of system.
So it's Crystal one. Second one was similar to what Alexa was talking about around 2030 day, and so that obviously the consents are coming up around then, so we don't want to make any big moves until then is the idea. But why would that number not be closer to the end goal, given that we've already said today that decisions around consents rather than the science and stuff? And I guess that the secondary question to that is that not prioritising the third Te Mana o Te Wai priority over the first?
So the 1200 is around fish barriers. So we don't want to go above 1200 until they're in place. And that's going to take some time to do. So if we said 1800 at 2030 and we don't have the fish barriers in place, then we think that the health of the river will be worse than if we say 1200 at 2030. And that gives us time to do that. So
could we have a conditional, a higher limit that would go in if we did have fish barriers in by 2030, and then if it's not, we have a lower limit?
I don't know the answer to that. We probably need to get some legal advice on that. The plan will signal at notification these stages, so they won't be, unclear. But I don't know the answer to that one.
And additional to the fish barrier challenge is indeed the allocation challenge as well, and how we've considered it would be appropriate to go through an allocation review is to require substantial additional metering, which would give us a substantially better picture of allocation, take, retake, discharge, all of those types of things, and give us the basis for a meaningful and hopefully productive conversation with the community around how to manage allocation going forward. We would need 5 years of that metered data roughly to be able to start that conversation, and then that conversation would again take some time, which still pushes you past that 2030 date.
One final question. How are the kaitapu recommendations, including that one for 4.3 QMX over winter, accommodated or incorporated, or at least considered?
Yep. So and we haven't had a specific conversation with iwi. We've just pulled through their recommendations from August 2021. The framework is different from them, so they were looking at a winter and a summer flow as opposed to a flow all year round. So we still have to have that conversation in terms of how this lines up with iwi expectations.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, we've got Councillor Scott waiting very patiently, and then Somerville.
And to be fair, I think the main thrust of my question's already been asked, but I will persevere.
Yep.
I won't take as long as the river's taken in the state that it's been in, but there is some concern in the community about the 17 years to get to this aspirational date. And one of the advantages of 2021 was the step-by-step to get there, so that the community could actually see that, hey, we're at 1200, and then we're going to be at 15, 18, and a real commitment, as opposed to potentially, hopefully it'll happen. What type of confidence can we have, and have we taken that into consideration, that expectation that we will get there, which was one of the advantages that we previously promoted as a council. So that's one part, that the psychology of it and the legality of it in terms of, will it ever actually happen? And the second one, just going back to you, Tom, surely there will be some health benefit to the river. So, for example, in 2035, if we said it had to be 1850, halfway between those two flows, surely that would be, tomato to Y, if we were just focusing on that as opposed to practical consent issues and so forth. Yeah, so the first question, the community, and the second one, are we actually right in saying there's no health benefits to have these?
Got those questions sorted.
So with regard to the health benefits, but certainly was not my intention to say there would be no health benefits, rather that the level of benefit, the level of improvement you see in the river as you increase in flow diminishes as you get into the higher, as you get into a higher flow range. So as you move from 900 to 1200, you see a substantial decrease in risk to a number of species and the ecosystem generally. As you move from 1200 to 1500, again, you see a reduction in risk, but not of the same order of magnitude that you saw from 9 to 12. And then from 15... So
it's really, really bad, but it's not too bad.
Your level
it must be, because we're aiming for 2.5.
Yeah,
so,
just sorry, we'll just
so your rate of risk reduction reduces as you move into those higher profiles. So what I'm saying is your best or most significant change that you'll see if you're moving up those steps as at the lower order. After that, you still see change, and it's still positive change, but it occurs at a rate that is not quite the same. So what I'm saying is you get your best bang for buck at the bottom end of the flow profile, and then that reduces over time. It's not to say that is a reason to not. It's just a fact.
Yep, that's fine. We've asked for the facts, and that's what you're giving. Awesome.
And then
Councillor Scott, the next
in
part.
relation to the first part, so we've talked about the 17 years and the flatlining, extending that, meters, changes and information, but this is just a package for a conversation. And if the feedback we get is the dates are wrong, the numbers are wrong, the timelines are wrong, then there'll be another conversation. So we have taken into account all of our requirements under the NPS. We think this complies with the NPS freshwater. We think it recognises the hierarchy of Te Mana OTY. But we're not saying we've got it right. We're saying that this is enough for a conversation.
Okay, right. Thank you. Answered those 2 points. Got even more hands up now. We've got Somerville, Malcolm, and was that you, Councillor Noon? Yep.
Right. Thank you. This has been talked around, and I guess just clarifying for my understanding and other people too, I think. So what is the mechanism for increasing the minimum flow between 2030 and 2040? And through that, will we see increases in the minimum flow over 1,200 litres a second between those targets?
So the plan will signal those step changes, and as people come in for consent, depending on where they fall in relation to 2030 and 2040, they'll have a higher minimum flow imposed on their consent. Because people don't come in all at the same time, or maybe they do, assuming people don't come in at the same time, you will start to see that the higher numbers having effect at different times.
Right. So just to clarify, between 2030 and 2040, over that period, those different consents will be coming in, and as they come in, conditions applied will be leading towards by 2040 at 2,500.
So they might have, and we probably haven't talked through this, but it might be a condition that says from X date in 2040, this shall be the minimum flow.
So 85% of the consents on the catchment will come in by the end of 2040. And just to clarify, so the minimum flow doesn't apply to a consent until it's come in for renewal and it's added as a condition. So it's about getting that minimum flow onto the consent so that we can enforce it. If it's not on the consent, they can operate outside of that minimum flow.
Thank you. And so just to clarify further then, is the expectation that, on the last day before 2040, the minute we're not still sitting at 1,200 litres a second? That makes sense.
So the consents will have different dates on them. So I don't think you'll see a blanket switch from 12 to 25, it's not going to be flipping a switch. But until we know when the consents come in and the term they get and whether they come in as a catchment, it's a bit of a hypothetical. It's unlikely that you would see that sudden switch.
Right, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Malcolm.
Just following up on Councillor Somerville's comment then, that the flicking of the switch could be the completion of new water sources. So you could in fact see a switch from a flow that's being happy and healthy to the required one.
That's correct.
By the flicking of the switch, it'd be that a dam or an alternate water source.
Probably still want quite a robust conversation about how to do that so that we don't lose the benefits that we've got.
Yes, absolutely correct, but it could change quite, although you'd have consents that were in before that time frame would indicate that it has to be at the 2.5. But that could be as simple as flicking a switch or opening a switch gate.
It may not rely on the river, I think is the point.
Yeah, what you see in front of you is the plan requirements, and any water user or decision maker in the catchment could make decisions that result in the river sitting at higher flows for longer periods of time, regardless of the consent.
Yeah. So following up from that, so if council had made the decision some 15 years ago or 16 years ago or 17 years ago, and I really did take with interest the comments from Mr. Peregrine about the deemed permit thing that never got done, and I concur with his thoughts, but had we done that process that time frame back, would we still be looking at a graduated return from the flow that was already in the catchment to the new whatever that figure was going to be?
We can't answer that. We just don't know what would have happened back then, sorry.
Okay.
Political decision probably.
No, but I'm just asking for the scientific fact of taking a river from a flow to another flow would be going through a similar process and on the time frame.
We don't know what the decision would
we're dealing with an existing NPS, and our response is ensuring that we are comfortable that what we put forward is robust, different time, different local, different direction, and so very difficult for us to speculate on what any earlier process would have looked like.
So you've asked me a question about the new water, no new water take, so you're going to give some clarity to those interested at the time. The other one was the Manahira Care Darogi target was 2040 to 2050, so you're going to say that you're going to come up with an explanation around that to go to consultation. We had a science report on the 23rd of August 23 that said flow at 2,000 litres per second at campgrounds provided a good level of ecosystem health, and that represents to me, and it stated in the report at the time, that represents the best available information. So my question would be, and I don't want this answer now, but I just think this will come up in your conversations that you're about to have, is why have we gone to 2.5? So just again, that's probably 1, 2, 3.
So I can answer that now if you'd like.
It's a good time.
No, I'll take that off. I don't want to take
It's
time
in the
on that.
paper, and we provide it to you in August.
It's probably an important one.
So you're right in terms of 2,000 and the ecological benefits, but the other ecological principle we had that as a policy team we've adopted because of the alignment to Te Mano to Wai is below. Running the river outside of its natural range is the equivalent of putting it through an extreme drought every year, and that range starts at 2.5. So that's why 2.5.
Right. And so the other one on the flows you consider, and I understand your rationale between going from the current regime to your peak regime at the end, and those figures will be debated, no doubt. But the figure that I'm a wee bit perplexed on is your start figure in 2030 of 1,200, and the rationale behind that when we had in our consenting regime a figure that had been offered up and was workable and had all the environmental science behind it of 1,100, that why we didn't use that figure.
So the 1,200 comes from the modelled numbers that we have done. We haven't looked at the consent. There's a separate team that does this. So that number is to align with the numbers that we set in the model that were predetermined some time ago. That number isn't, that is the number that we think reflects well. That's not to say, taking feedback on board, that it won't change.
Yes, so the science report looked at a graduated number of options that were, I think, for ease of consumption, nice round numbers, 900, 1,200, 15, 18. 2.5 and 3. And 1,200, for all the reasons that are explained in the report, and the discussion we had earlier was picked on that basis. There is absolutely a conversation to be had around whether or not 1,200, 1,100 or 1,300 is the right number based on principles of consultation and any other information that might come in.
The key thing to note is our modelling was done at 12, 15, 18. So that's why the number is in there. It's the number that was extracted from the model.
And for for the current consenting approach and numbers, we're consenting under those rules that were introduced under PC7, which are those shorter term frameworks, but also speak to the actual use and the formula that's there for that. So in terms of a specific number for Menahira Kia, that isn't part of that current rule framework, but they have an existing number on their consent, then we would carry that over. So again, just wanting to sort of differentiate between what we do now under PC7, then what is looking forward through these provisions through the plan and that minimum flow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, well, we do want to get into the debate at some time, but I know I've got other people down, and Councillor Noon, you haven't asked any questions yet, so.
Do you want me to ask my question now?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay,
Yep.
so it was actually to do with Plan Change 7, and as Joe has just alluded to, 6-year consent, so it was called in by the Minister 2021. So just what impact has that had on, because I sense with the flow of water permits coming in over the next period of time, it has impacted obviously on the transitional period from notification 30 June 24 to 2040. So can you just outline that impact, if any, that Plan Change 7's had on the transition time?
I'm going to pass to Joe.
Yeah, I'll start and then I'll get Simon to chip in as well. A key thing with those 6-year permits was part of it is to enable us to get the rule framework right for when we are reconsenting them, when they come into us. So that's part of that. And also there was some around differentiating between what was paper allocation and what people were actually using as well. And what we've got now is a spread of expiry dates, because we have been trying to progress those in packages in terms of how we process them. They are all then coming in at about a similar time in terms of 6 years. So again, it gives us the ability to take a coordinated look at those when they come in 6 years' time, bearing in mind some have been easier or more straightforward for those, so there could be a bit of a year's difference, but as Simon said, we're getting 85% of those ones through again by 2040. But the key thing for us and a little bit for the applicants is the certainty of the rule framework that we are operating over, because as soon as we're having to consent under notified and operative rules, it gets complicated, and we're very keen to ensure that we avoid that where possible. Yeah.
So there's a number of quite large applications for Menahira Kia that are still being processed. Yep. I think adding up to around 68 consents, which is about a third of the consents on the catchment. So you'd assume that they will get a 6-year time frame, which will bring them in 2029, 2030. So we're factoring that into that 2030 date.
Thank you.
Can I ask a corollary to that, a sort of supplement to that issue?
Really quickly, because we have got other people with their hands up.
Thank you so much. That's the bit that I don't quite get, because the devil's in the detail, isn't it? You've got roughly 200 consents out there on the Menahira Kia.
183 surface water.
183. And you've got a range of consents that have already been granted by us to get access to the water. Some are even up to 30 years, there's a maximum up to 30, 35 years.
2056 is the last one.
Yeah, and they are generally the ones before Plan Change 7 in the shorter duration, and some of those are the associated ones, say for storage or things like that, not necessarily the taken use. Yeah.
But there's a range, isn't there? Yeah. Quite a significant range. Can you just clarify for me, please? So if I've got a consent, irrespective, and I think that's what you said, of the minimum flow, I'll still get access to that water. Yes or no?
Yeah, so we enforce based on your consent conditions. So you will set a minimum flow, and then consents will reflect that minimum flow as a consent condition when your consent comes in for renewal, and then we'll enforce it after that. So if you set a minimum flow tomorrow, it will be on none of the consents.
Yeah.
So we won't be able to be
Yes is the answer.
Yeah, yes.
So, yes, I can.
Yes.
Yes, I can evade
Yeah.
the minimum flow.
Yes.
Yes, and that's the issue for me. So although, and this is important, so although we're talking about a minimum flow of going to be 12 liters per second or whatever, so moving on, there'll be a significant number of consents who will be exempt from having that applied to them. Yes.
So what we noted at the start is that flow would also come with a consent review. We would call those consents in. So that's the bit I didn't want to look at, Joe.
No, that's what I was.
Yeah.
That's what I'm.
Yeah,
That's what I'm trying to clarify.
So there's an equity issue with making sure everybody's on the same flow, but that calling in process, we want to make that as narrow as possible, and that's why 2030 works. So we would call them in so that everybody would be subject to that minimum flow.
Right. So you're going to
over
call in
time.
all of the consents, despite the ones that go out to 2050, in 2030, and you're going to say, we might have said that, but it's now going to be this.
So only the ones that expire beyond 2030, we would call them, and there's about 60 of those.
60.
So 2/3 of the consents expire at or before 2030.
But at the end of the day, adamantine is on 2030 or whatever the particular date is, there better be 1,200, minimum 1,200 litres per second flowing through the Manuhira care. Yeah, irrespective. So you might have access to drain the whole river, but you're not going to get it. Yes.
So that's because we're going to be putting that minimum flow requirement on as a consent condition or through that review process.
I think we've established this. We have talked about this already in the questioning as well, but it is an important point. Thank you. Right, we have got a few people who wanted to ask supplementary questions. However, I'm just noting that it's 11:30 now, and we've got lunch was programmed for 12, so we're going to end up into lunchtime, but that's okay. And actually, we've got some fantastic questions coming out here, and it's really important that they're answered. So with that in mind, if you can just keep the time short as possible, but we've got Councillor Wilson, Ware and Laws.
Yeah, but thank you, Madam Chair, and I will try and keep that as quickly as possible. K and L, 3K, 3L, which it starts the sentences over time. And the clarity for me there is, what does over time mean? Are we talking 2030 or 2040 for those? And that's the alternative flows. No, yeah.
Yes.
I may have missed that in the discussion, sorry.
No, you haven't. So I think it's in the report, but that's those two aspects, the minimum flow and the upper catchment and or residuals on the trips and the allocation, they require the metering to be in place and to get that 5 years of data. So we are thinking of plan change around about 2032, something like that. Gives us the time to get the data, and then it might be a bit later than that.
So I'm just picking out, so the easier it is to get the monitoring done, or I mean, these things are not cheap. For anyone who doesn't know, some of these cost $10,000-$15,000 to put in. And those are the simple ones. So in order to get the data as quickly as possible so we can do that, that may be a financial constraint to some of these users, and we may want to look at how we can get that. Hydrogeneration is I think the full standard is hydrogeneration. There's no reference in there in how that would be affected, because that's a sort of prioritised use. Is it not? I'm just wondering, is that just a red herring when it comes to these things?
I can't give you a definitive answer. Tom's saying he thinks so, but we'll come back and just check.
And the last question, sorry if I may. Last time we were at this round table, I had asked about a map, because I haven't found a really helpful map yet. And I think when we go out for consultation, people understanding where those flows are at present and the takes at a general scale. I mean, how much water comes out of Thompson's Creek and how much that might look like, but also the upper and lower Manuhira Care and middle, I think it was. Those are really important, understanding where those lines are in the science report. And I'd really like us to be consulting at a level that people can see, because I mean, I've heard other people talk about Dairy Creek, but I don't know how many people in the lower Manuhira Care may benefit from those alternatives that people, I mean, Kevin talked about some of that stuff too. And so having an eye of a way forward and understanding that would be really helpful. Is that possible?
We will see what we can do in terms of mapping.
need to be told it was.
I understand the sentiment, so we'll get to.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Councillor Weir.
Yeah, just coming back to the Kaitaku recommendations, I was just wondering if you could explain what, so one is to have one or more freshers in summer of at least 4.3. Just wondering if you could explain what that means.
So a minimum flow doesn't really help with a number of the Kaitahu recommendations. That's more about how you apply, how you manage allocation across the flow profile. So what's been really common in Otago is massive primary allocation blocks, i.e., what you can take at a lower flow period. But there are rivers in Otago that have supplementary permit system, which works by having a block of water that goes to the river, and that's the water that sits below the minimum flow. And then above the minimum flow, you have a reasonably modest primary block of water that can be taken by users. And as the flow of the river rises, you have another block that goes back to the river. And then so you might go from 1,000 litres a second to 2,000 litres a second. At 2,000 litres a second, a whole bunch of water becomes available again for people to take up into another flow. And you keep progressively moving forward like that. And it could look like 40% of the water within a block going to users and 60% staying with the river, and or a number of other things, depends on the river. But that type of flow regime would be an appropriate way to achieve those Kaitahu recommendations. But that's what that allocation review is about.
So just for clarity, when they talk about freshers flushing flows, so a high flow coming through over a short period of time to move gravels down and things like that.
And is that been considered in the
not part of the recommendations.
So would be addressed in that allocation review, which yes, does fall as a part of the recommendation.
Okay, Councillor Laws, you had your hand up before, but you might have
No, I've just, yes, and one final question. When you were asked about the influence of Te Mano Twai, you said 2,000 litres per second, but I just want to confirm that this is right. It would have been 2,000 litres per second, but the influence of Te Mano Wai has boosted it to 2,500 litres per second, because when you consider that, is that correct?
Not quite. So we get ecological benefits consistent with Te Mano Wai at 2,000, but what we don't get is the river still runs at what the ecologists say it would be a drought, unless it's at 2.5 as a minimum. So you get a better alignment with Te Mano Wai at 2,500 than you do at 2.
So if it was just NPSFM by itself,
Oh,
It
would.
I think so. Within the science report we gave two pieces of analysis, and said if you look at the ecological assessment being carried out, the 2 looks about right. But I use the language "looks about right," and that this isn't a precise exercise, and there is error and estimates associated with coming to that number. Likewise, the same is true when you look at the hydrology. But what we were trying to say was that around 2 to 2.5, you see a level of agreement. One of the key limitations with the ecological stuff is that we're measuring the presence of species and the presence of their abundance and how they're behaving under the current conditions, not under conditions that you might expect to see. And so you get a lot of inherent kind of error in there. And so what we suggested was another way to look at it, to look at the situation, would be just to use hydrology and consider the principle of falling within that natural flow range, and how that might apply. And I guess it's just 2 ways of looking at it. And I think the policy team have looked at this, and their assessment has been that probably preferable to go with that principle rather than the ecological assessments.
okay, and well, that leads to the very next question, which is you're recommending to go to 1,200, obviously, in 2030. The question that was asked to you before, is that with or without fish barriers? It doesn't matter, we're going to go to 1,200. Does the 1,200 then reduce the risk of the predation of trout upon indigenous species by going to 1200?
You would see a slightly increased risk, but our assessment to date suggests that that would be modest compared to the difference of moving up to 2,500.
It's an endangered species, isn't it?
Yep.
So a modest predation would actually be quite dangerous to their health.
Yeah, and I think what we're suggesting is that we'll be able to make more robust assessments in a short period of time as we move through assessing fish passage and all that type of thing. And if it were the case that that urgent attention was required before 1,200, there is time within the recommendations to be able to manage that.
You mean not to go to 1,200?
Or potentially to get a fish barrier in before 2030.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Right, we've got one last question, Councillor Malcolm.
Oh, yeah, just on the dates. So we go to community consultation on the 27th of October.
Yes.
You were saying you might have had some discussions with iwi, but with your recommendations you put out there, will the community have an understanding of iwi's position before we go on the 27th of October?
So we've had no discussions with iwi at this point in time around this, other than they're aware of
Other than using their
other than using the August 2021. So we will be prioritising those conversations along with some other groups as well.
Right, and that will be available for councillors and community to understand their positions by the 17th
Thought
of
about
October.
how we'll socialise that, but we will think about that and let you know. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's all from me.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the very free and frank answering of questions there. All were answered and we all got a chance to ask everything we wanted to. So thanks very much for that part. We had Councillor McCall earlier on saying that he would like to move a motion, which will be handy at this point so we can go into debate.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Before I just move a motion, I'd just like to just say thank you very much to the team that we've had bringing it to us at this stage. And from my point of view, it's been through the briefing paper, the science briefing paper and the workshop. And to me, the paper was a pretty clear paper, which didn't really have any surprises in it to me. And it was very clear and easily understood. I think we've had a very good round of questioning, of which probably was aware of quite a number of the questions that were going to be coming up. So probably best just to sit back. So I'd just like to take this opportunity to move the recommendations as put in the paper, that the council notes a report, that the council notes the policy provisions that will form the basis for consultation with the community to manage the Menehira Kia Rohe is set out in paragraph 3 of this paper, and notes the council will be asked in June 2024 to adopt the section 32 report and publicly notify the proposed land and water regional plan.
Okay, we got a seconder for that. Councillor Mepham, do you want to speak to it now, Lloyd?
Yeah, and I'd quite like to speak to it. Thanks. So I think once again, I think from what we're actually not being asked, or we're being asked to note policy provisions in the paper to inform the development of the land and water plan, and it's really to create the basis for the community engagement and to get feedback to inform the continued development of the land water plan. And it's having said that, it's been a very long process getting to here. It's been a long journey, but it's an important decision that we're going to make today to start to set a direction. We must recognise, well, once again, we must recognise a huge amount of work that's been completed to inform the paper, not the work of the technical advisory group, ORC specialist people, and all the community and everybody that's been involved, because there's been a massive number of people involved. There's been a lot of work going. It's not a perfect world, and we'll never find the perfect solutions. We must, however, find a common ground to enable the process of returning the Māori of the Menehira Kia and start the process off. This paper, in my opinion, finds that middle ground. It's not perfect, but it sets a direction of travel. This is the start of the process. We are only really beginning the journey from here. We need to, and we will continue to collect information on the river, and so that it can inform future decisions on the river, so that we end up So we end up having the whole catchment being treated as one and being treated equitably across the whole catchment. We need to accept there will be changes. And as we learn more about the catchment, that's put out in point 44, which says we'll end up doing plan changes, et cetera. It hasn't been mentioned today, but the economic report showed that there'll be very significant impacts on many individuals that live within the area. And I think it's really important that we recognise that the decision that we are making today is going to impact individuals and impact them in different ways, but it's going to be trying. So these landowners are going to need the support, and they're going to need to make the changes to their businesses and to their lifestyles. And so we just need to respect that. We need to work with the communities. Well, actually, we'll start again. We need to give the communities time to take on board what we're proposing. We need to give the communities. We need to be able to support the communities, because there'll be many ways. There's many ways that we as a council will be able to support the communities, but we need to go to the community so that we can react to them rather than them reacting to us, and so that we can support them in the areas that's most important to them. But in reality, when we're doing that, the best support that we can give is a willingness to listen and the willingness to just be part of and to communicate, keep the communication going with the community as we start going into a period of change. And I'd just like to thank all the landowners on the menu here at Care for their patience while they're waiting to get here. And I'd like to also just mention the awesome work that the Catchment Group Network up there is doing. They've been continually proceeding on their visions of water quality for the area and been working tirelessly to create environmental improvements all during this process as well. So that's pretty much my opening thing. I think we've got a paper. It's not perfect. We're not all going to agree with everything, but we all need to be on to get to a starting block. And so thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Meath, do you want to speak now or reserve your right? Yeah.
Look, I think that the debate seems to be around the implementation process. There doesn't seem to be too much concern around the establishment of the minimum flow. It was good to hear Nigel Peregrine expressing the Fish and Game views around the implementation time. I agree it's taking a long time, but I still support this recommendation because I know what it has involved to get this far. You know, there's been scientific analysis. I recognise the expertise of the staff that have been involved in this process. We have existing consents on the river. There have been economic impact assessments. There's been community consultation, and that's continuing. It's informed by the National Policy Statement of Freshwater Management and Te Mana Te Wai. And on top of this, we've had the politics of previous councils and other involvements that have got us to this point. So this is a milestone to get it this far. I'm supporting it.
Okay, Councillor Laws, your hand was up next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Manuherikia River has not flowed naturally since the middle of the 19th century. And when Falls Dam was built 90 years ago, it was to ensure that the Manuherikia Valley became an agricultural hub and a key economic driver for central Otago and its people. The drive now has been set in good part by Wellington bureaucrats through the National Policy Statement on Freshwater Management, but also Te Mana Te Wai, the latter more an ideology than a serious conservation document. So we've asked for the science and we have received it, but ultimately this is a political decision for us to make. We have to balance the needs of the environment, the needs of the river, the needs of the community, and the needs of the region. And that's why we've been elected to this role, to make those kind of decisions. I proceed from the basis that fish are never more important than people. And that rivers are neither animate nor sentient. They don't have a mauri and they don't have a soul. And for people to suggest such is to stem into nothing less than superstition. The issue then becomes for us, what does the science tell us? And can I compliment the staff, the ORC, for their full scientific analysis and for the time that it has taken? It will be critical in having that consultation and conversation with the community. There will be 7 elections, general elections, between now and 2040. 7. It's a remarkable number, really, because that's how much the opportunity exists for national policy around this issue and this issue in general to change. And prior to 2017, the Manuhira farmers and community were encouraged to irrigate, to increase the amount of food that was grown by themselves in the best interests of the country. And it's important that we understand that that may be the imperative from next year as well, because there is nothing sure that there's going to be a change of government in a month. And that these issues, along with others, will be reviewed at a national level. And we've got to be nimble enough to be able to practice with that. I do hope the consultation that the Otago Regional Council has with the community is sincere. Consultation that we've had in the past has had a nasty tendency, can I say, to be, we're going through the motions, we're ticking that box, and we're going to do what we were always going to do anyhow, irrespective of what you say. And I say to certain councillors around this table, no to us all. We must listen. We must hear. And we must be prepared to change our views if the community can convince us and has the arguments marshalled to suggest that what we practice is wrong, needs to be amended, can be altered in a more beneficial way. I am nervous about this process because I know the impact that it is going to cause upon good, decent people who make a sincere contribution to the life of my community and my region and the towns that are dependent upon them. At a time that we need to be growing food for a hungry world, and we need to be developing an economy to try and pretend that we still live in the first world, the idea that, again, suddenly, fish are more important than people just strikes me as anathematic to common sense. There is a, I believe, happy medium. I hope we strike that after we have consulted with the community. But I do say that moving to 2,500 litres per second is too much when the ecology is clear at 2,000. And I hope to God that Te Mana Otawai is put into the dustbin of history in a month's time, and that we can actually look at benefiting all in a consensus rather than having an ideology drive our decision. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes.
Okay, thank you. I'm concerned at the long time frames to right this problem that's developed over a relatively short period of time. And I see our lengthy solution as a further delay to allow those who abstract to find new ways of doing business as usual when we need to look for new things to do, and to display a willingness to explore, innovate and adjust to the difficult circumstances of farming in a desert dry landscape. As I say this, I acknowledge that we all have a part in this. Extraction has been our economic base in New Zealand, but I'm tired of narratives of feeding the world, when the reality is we're in a commodity market with much of our valuable ecology disappearing and as milk solids into junk food around the world. So you could equally have different narratives around contributing to obesity. So let's just get that one aside. Now, over the 30 years of notice we've all had that today was coming, we have really done extremely little. And our river that we're talking about today, Manuhira, has deteriorated, and we've not seen innovation that is doing something new with what we have. There sits the need for regulation, and that's why we're here today. While I acknowledge the practical issues of consenting, fish barrier establishment and so on, I'm concerned that these things mask an unwillingness to put the first priority of Te Mana Otawai into its rightful position. As a result, the river will limp along into delayed recovery as we also deal with changing hydrologies and other consequences of changing climate. It is not going to get easier. We need serious innovation and serious new bases for our economy. Our own inconvenient truths, our economic ones in particular, are home to roost, and our response is to continue to support unsustainable land use and practices until at least 2040. This should concern every one of us. Fortunately, this paper is only for noting, and it's a start. And I know it's been very difficult to get to this point. I do not have criticism of our staff or scientists. There is much discussion yet to be had, and my hope is that all people of the Manuhirakia, especially those who don't feel they have a direct connection with this issue, will respond to the engagement and consultation calls that we are making and get their views heard. I'm very disappointed to feel that my only choice is to support this, this noting, lacking though it is. Thank you.
Joe. Councillor Scott, then Wilson.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Fundamentally, I believe in the following principles: te mana o te wai, in terms of prioritising the health of the waterway. Secondly, the fact that the minimum flow of a waterway should reflect where waterways range naturally sits. Consideration in working with our iwi partners. Consideration working with their general stakeholders, with their community, and consideration of science. And I think it's fair to say through the report in this process, we've come out with a minimum flow in the order of at least 2,500 litres a second and reduced allocations. So we've got that paper number, and I think there's some further work to be done there. As Lloyd pointed out, we haven't talked much about economics, but yes, there will be economic consequences. However, I'm hoping that a transition time should assist any necessary changes on the land. Potentially land use change, potentially water storage, potentially connection to the Clutha. I'm not sure, that's for the future. I make the point though that while I support the bulk of this report, I do not agree with the proposed time scenario, the 7 years to get to 1,200 and another 10 years to basically double that. From my perspective, I think there was some merit in the stepped approach that we previously looked at. And for example, maybe just simply one additional step halfway, 2035, 1850 litres per second. And I'm hoping that staff, in terms of this engagement process, will consider that. Many in the community actually want to witness improvements in the river. You know, not the marginal increase to the 1,200 and then the 17 years to get a healthy river. I believe, as I've said, and as previously proposed, we need at least one more step. To me, we need to prioritise the health of the river. We need to actually practice te mana o te wai. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to the people around the table today, especially the staff. I think the three of you actually sitting at the table today have made a significant improvement on where we were 2 years ago, and I want to acknowledge that because it was thought back then we didn't have the science, and I think taking time to get that science is a good place. Michael started off on a history lesson which sent me down a rabbit hole really, but 1877 there was a railway opened up, the Otago Central Railway line, which in the book that was written about it was Over the Garden Wall. It was about how can we maximise the potential of the land beyond Dunedin and to feed Otago and New Zealand. And part of that history was the development of orchards and a whole lot of other things. To the landowners out there who from the time of that railway line did everything that was asked of them, maybe not the gold miners, but the rewards were very much reaped elsewhere in Dunedin. And the structures and the buildings we see here today are from that as a witness of the gold and of the production that came out of that area and other parts of Otago. But here we are in finding a solution to what has been everyone doing their best, but as the government set the agenda and this council, now asking them to carry the costs in fixing those solutions and finding the solutions. And I just want to acknowledge that we are relying heavily on the endeavours of and the payment of that community in the model that we've created or is being used. We are relying on the good works already in place by that community and leading the way with the fish barrier and the River Tonson's Quarter as an example. I don't think all of us are listening to the science. We have been clearly told that 1,200 gives us the biggest wins, and people are still sitting around the table, not acknowledging that and not listening to those responses. And that is concerning. This is a consultation process. On the 27th of October, we, and I hope all of us, are going to be up with the staff listening to the community. I just want to put out there now that if anyone in that community wants us up here earlier to have one-on-one discussions, we will all, and any of us, be available for that. I think we need to understand that. But the biggest opportunity now is to look forward and say, how can we together get to the place that this works the best? And that's about looking at storage, other opportunities. It's about looking at what other water might be available. If we were to step into this quickly and without any other alternative sources of water, the economic impact on the area would be substantial. And that would have devastating effects for the people who are doing wildlife control, supporting some wonderful works and landscapes around the area that would just potentially be at risk. And so I don't want to overcook it, but I think we have to be really clear that we need to do this together and find solutions together. That may mean discussions at the long-term plan. It may be a mini long-term plan in year 2 or 3 once we have a better understanding of, or a consultation separately when we've got a better idea of what those answers are. But please engage. My plea is for the community to come along and tell us what's wrong in it. I think the first A might be wrong. The dairy support, so the dairy and dairy support rules may be wrong in there at the moment. And those are the sort of things I know that staff are wanting to hear about. So please engage. Please do it as a positive action in the first instance, and please come along and talk to us about those other solutions.
Thank you. Councillor Weir.
I think we're in a good position right now, and I thanks to the staff for that. Unfortunately, it is a position we should have been in 30 years ago, and of course that's no fault of the staff. But nonetheless, we're here today, and we do still have a long way to go. And we also understand that some of the reasons for going that slow are economic and out of practicality, and some are because going too fast would be detrimental to some of those ecological values in certain ways. I do think there are a couple of positive changes that we can make along the way before we finish this process. I think broadly 2.5 is QMX is a very good compromise, and I'm glad that we've been able to reach this number. I do think that what Brian mentioned about an additional step could be beneficial there, and I do think we should look into conditional 2030 provisions, for example, minimum flow of 1.8 if we can get fish barriers in place by then, or sticking with the 1.2 if not. I find it hard to believe that, if it was a priority, we couldn't get fish barriers installed in the next 7 years. And I do think that there needs to be more thought given to those criterion recommendations, and especially that higher winter limit as well, and considering that seasonality. But looking into the future, even beyond 2040, I think we also need to consider how we ensure that these policies have the desired effect in the long run, that future leaders don't drag us down further in this process, and that no sort of loopholes or unintended consequences arise, and that the same amount of water isn't just being brought in from elsewhere, and that is instead appropriate land use in this remarkable natural landscape is encouraged, meaning ecosystems and communities alike can thrive sustainably in the long run. Kia ora.
Thank you. Councillor Noon and possibly Councillor Malcolm as the last speakers. Oh, sorry, Councillor Somerville, you were first, and then Councillor Noon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah.
I guess, I mean, in the long run, healthy communities depend on having a healthy environment. I regret the delays that have been in the past and that this can't happen sooner, but I can't see that the processes we have available to us allow us to move more quickly. I think that's by the discussion and the papers there. And the council, of course, does have a role in helping communities change to a sustainable future in moving towards appropriate land use in the future. And giving some certainty is part of that. So yes, I will be supporting this as well. Thank you.
Thank you, and sorry to miss you out there by mistake. Councillor.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. Yes, this is a defining moment, but it is obviously subject to genuine and meaningful consultation with our community. That's number one. I would also like to go down the pathway of a little bit of history, so just bear with me, Madam Chair. I think it's really important for the council to be mindful of a decision made back in 2004 when we adopted, our predecessors adopted the water plan early in 2004. And what that set the parameter for policy decision making out in the field, policies and rules, was a very enabling, permissive water plan. And I think we heard today from staff, and Tom alluded to the primary allocation take, which was, I would suggest, fairly liberal. So we had a water plan that was enabling and permissive. And over a period of time, and it was actually the other important thing too, was it was an effects-based plan, which pretty much focused on landowners being able to do pretty much whatever they liked on the land, but if they caused effects beyond the land, that caused obviously a concern from a regulatory perspective. And I think the important thing, if you turn the clocks forward to 2014, when the first National Policy Statement for Freshwater and National Environmental Standard was adopted at central government, that took us towards a activity-based regime. So at that point, our water plan was totally out of step with national direction. 2 or 3 years later, 2017, there was a new or updated NPS FM, National Policy Statement for Freshwater. And then 2020 was updated again, and then there was amendments in 2022. And that took us even further away from our water plan concept of effects-based. And there was some councillors around this table that will remember back in 2018, we were going to set minimum flows for the Manuhiri Care, the Cadrona and the Arrow. And we went against a staff recommendation by majority for a really, really good reason, because we were going to develop a policy then that didn't talk to what central government was moving towards, based. We were going to base it on our water plan. And there was a really fundamental directional change that we made at that point. So the short and long of this is we've moved towards an activity-based regime. The new land and water plan has got alignment with Te Mana Rauta Wai, the current NPS FM 2022. So tick in the box in both those areas. I think the key thing today, we've had a lot of discussion about the implementation period or the transition period of 17 years. And I think it's important just to reflect on where we were back in 2004 and where we are now. It's pretty much a U-turn in terms of the policy framework. So I think that's really, really important. And the other important aspect today is that we need to send a signal, and Councillor Wilson has already alluded to the importance of working with our community to achieve the alignment with a new water regime, because this is a new way of respecting and dealing with water going forward. So we need to be with our community. And when it comes to additional on-farm storage or community storage, we need to be with them through those conversations. And what will our contribution be? I've got no idea, but we cannot leave them stranded. And I'm talking about not only landowners, I'm talking about the wider community. So not only from an economic perspective, but from a ecological perspective, from a social perspective, from a cultural perspective, we need to walk with them to get to that point where we feel and they feel comfortable, and we cannot turn our backs on them because we need to build trust through this process. These are not easy processes. We've had plenty of criticism back in 2021, August 2021, when we didn't note minimum flow for the Manuhira Kia. And to remind the people around the table that weren't here then, we had incomplete science. We needed that science. We've now got a much clearer direction. It's not absolutely perfect, as people have already alluded to around the table, but we've got a more robust and defendable position now. So, yeah, with regards to fish barriers and all those other aspects, I'm sure things will become clearer further down the track. But I think it's just really important where we need to plug some gaps going forward to ensure that we keep faith with our community. Thank you.
Okay. Excuse me, Councillor Malcolm, did you want to speak?
Oh, yeah, no, that'll be really good. Look, I'm going to support the motions, but I have a few caveats around that. I will be supporting it because it gets it out, and we need it out with the community, and we need to start the process going. Yeah, look, then I congratulate the staff on the work that they've done to get to this position, because there's a huge depth of work and behind there. Councillor McCall said that we need to have a willingness to listen. That's simple, you listen. But the reality is, from that listening, we actually need to act on what we've heard and put that into place and sort where it fits into our process. We've been told again that that our paper is not perfect. There's imperfections through it. Well, I really want to know what those imperfections are, and I want to be able to work towards fixing those imperfections. So that needs to be shared. But two things we should be aiming for through this whole process. There's two things we should be aiming for. There's a strong, vibrant river with a strong, vibrant community. Simple. Both of them go hand in hand, and somewhere along the line, ORC needs to jump in. Forget about why we've taken so long to get here. We are here now, but if we want a strong, vibrant river and a strong, vibrant community, we need to jump on board and make this process happen. There's no one, I have not seen in my time looking at the ODT, I have not seen a plethora, a big magnitude of court cases against growers in the Manuhira Kia for doing things wrong with the river. They have genuinely tried under the laws of the land at the time to run that river as best they can. Those laws and rules probably weren't that blooming good and should have been sorted out a long time ago. So we need to take this as a start position, sort the river where it needs sorted to a science-based level, and support the community to do that. Because if we can I can increase that river tomorrow. I can go up there and have a chat with 30 or 40 farmers and say, let's go on holiday, we're moving somewhere else, and the river will come up, and that will completely destroy the community. So I'm sure that's not our aim. So let's get there and let's do it. Let's work with our fish and game, with those regulatory authorities that Mr. Peregrine was talking about. Let's work and let's get the very best solution together, because that's the only way we'll do it. I'm going to support the motion, but I will be working hard. I will be listening hard, but I will be acting on what I've heard to make sure that forms part of the right way forward. So well done, staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we are now back to right of reply, if you'd like one, Councillor McCall.
Yeah, well, thanks. Just very briefly, thanks everybody for their questions, and it's been a really good discussion, and thanks everybody for the comments at the end, because I think the comments actually point out where we're at. We're all nobody's taking the decision lightly, and they're all very have deep thoughts about where they're sitting with us. So I think we're in a good place to move forward. Just thanks very much to the staff for actually having a paper that's clear and we all understand it, and clear answers through the day as well. So I think that's fair enough. I think I'm happy for the motion to be put to you.
Thank you. Okay, well, we're at that point then. We've got them over in the second recorded there. Recommendations are before you. There's 3 of them there. And I think I propose we'll just take them all together. Yep. Nobody's calling for a division, so I'll do that now. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Okay, I've just, okay, at this point, I think it is appropriate to thank everyone who has participated in this meeting. That's a lot bigger than what we can see right here in front of us. There's a huge amount of work that's gone on. Thank you to those that have appeared at the meeting today as well. Thanks heaps for the robustness of the questioning that added a whole heap of value. Thank you so much for the fairness in the debate as well, and for the decision that's been made today. And I didn't speak, but I just want to remind everyone that this is now about consultations as well. So really want everyone to get involved, and we will be doing that in a genuine manner. You've seen that we've asked a lot of questions. We're really inquisitive, our staff are as well, and we really do value people's input. So do come along and get involved. We really do value that process. So thank you, everyone. I'd like to propose that we adjourn now for lunch. Seconded, Councillor Wilson, all in favour? Aye. Against? Carry. Oh, yeah, we'll come back. When were we thinking? 1 o'clock. When were we thinking before? Sorry. We have got till 1 o'clock, everyone. So anyone listening online, we'll be back at 1 o'clock. Well done, everyone.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, it's probably been. I hate these things. I hate technology.
Probably. An expert.
I've been trying
Okay, welcome back everyone. We are underway at 1 o'clock as we said we were going to, and we're on to what is labelled as 8.1, I think, in your papers, which is the chair report. It is there just for noting. If there's anything you want to hear about in more detail, I can. But yeah, just wanted to note there in the beginning that as we're entering into consultation phase, just remembering about the context of all waterways across Otago and just how blessed we actually are in this region to have some absolutely amazing waterways. From the Clutha, huge, massive, mighty river draining our deep water lakes, up the coast, the Taieri, again, a very special waterway, very diverse from the dry hinterland all the way through to the coast. And then the further north, Dunedin as well. And pretty lucky to have a waterway that flows right through Dunedin City. And then up the coast into North Otago as well, and diverse systems there too. And many areas of our waterways are really, really high quality as well. So we're very lucky there. Some definitely do need our attention, but we are pretty fortunate, and that's where we want to stay. And we do need to improve where we have got those issues. And just reminding ourselves the context of we're discussing a lot of rules and regulations, but there's so much happening in the other space as well, the things that we want to do as communities. And communities are getting on and doing those. So just recognising that there's so much there, and planning through LTP as well isn't just around the rules and regulations, but is around that other space too. And I know a lot of councillors have spoken on that earlier today. So I just noted some of that at the beginning because it's an important time for our council. As we head into the final pre-notification consultation for our water plan. And that's kicked off already. So yes, Kate, have you got a question?
I just wanted to thank you for that paragraph in your report. I think it's a really important message, and I wish the ODT was still here, but maybe they're listening in to maybe report on it. But I raised it because yesterday at the OCC meeting that we had around the governance, it was a challenge put out that all of us could be considering being on catchment committees for that experience and to understand that. And I think when you talk about things under the radar, there are some really neat things that don't and shouldn't be under the radar. And so I just wanted to reflect that challenge and encourage people to think about it. You get a lot of good out of it, and it's a nice space to be in after sitting around the table doing regulatory stuff all day long. So just wanted to share that as a possible action for us all.
Very good. Councillor Forbes.
I really, I wouldn't be raising this except that Kate just has, but it's often said that 99% from change is not from the rules. I just have to push back on that. No one would wear seatbelts if we didn't have rules to do so. We'd probably still be driving drunk. If we relied on things to be voluntary, no one would have given up plastic bags. On it goes. There are many, many ways that voluntary stuff doesn't work, and that is not taken away from all the voluntary work that takes place, and I do acknowledge that. But regulation, there's a YNG, regulate.
It's a powerful 1% that we do need to use as well, and is an important role for this council, and does give strength to the rest of the 99 as well. So hear what you're saying.
That's
absolutely.
It's just I wouldn't have mentioned it otherwise.
Okay, Councillor Scott.
Yeah, cool. Is it community consultation we're going through, or is it community engagement?
It's the actual term then.
To be fair, we're probably using them interchangeably, but it is engagement. We are looking for feedback.
So I think we should hold the line on that if that's what it is, because at some point there's going to be consultation.
Yeah, there's informal consultation. There's formal consultation that happens after notification, and then that's right. There's interchangeably before between informal consultation or engagement. But you're right. There's slightly different.
I'm not trying to be pedantic. It's just that the processes will be different. Subtly different under engagement than they are consultation. So people need to understand that so their expectations are aligned. Yeah. Cool.
Yep, good point. Thank you. Okay, any questions or anything else? No. Okay, there are a few letters there appended. You have seen those already. That's just so that there's a public record of those. And yes, we do. We'll move the report for noting. Somebody care to do that? Councillor Wilson, seconded. Councillor Noon, all in favour? Aye, against, carried. Next, the Chief Executive's report.
Thanks, Gretchen. So this is back on, we were missing a few reports. The last two, we're now back to, I guess, what I will hope will become a consistent report for the balance of this year in terms of what's included. The land and water plan, we've been through that this morning, and just flagging, as Gretchen has mentioned, that milestone of starting this round 3 consultation/engagement at North Otago on Monday, which was another critical part of this whole process before we report back to council with the outcomes of that this side of Christmas. And we've included our milestone report as we have for the last few months. So in terms of the critical question around, are we still on track to meet our notification date of mid next year? Yes, we are. It's pleasing. Long-term plan similarly remains on track. You'll note in the report there are 2 things that are pushed into orange, which are around engagement and the engagement process, and also the communication of the long-term plan consultation material. So they will be coming back. They're not going to affect the critical path of that project. That was just a decision made by me to delay one of those papers and pull them together for the October council meeting, but doesn't affect our ability to meet the key timeframes of the long-term plan, and good engagement and conversations at the various conversations we're having about that project. Financial reporting is now included for the 23-24 year. We're only 2 months into the financial year, so there's nothing of significance to note. Q3, end of September, and those reports that come through to the October council meeting will include our first forecasts for the year, and we'll be able to highlight anything that we think needs to be flagged as a risk or opportunity in terms of our financials for this year, noting council's direction to run a budget in accordance with what was set in the annual plan. So we'll look forward to bringing those forecasts through next month, but those end of month 2 reports are there for reference. And level of service measures, we do have 3 that are orange, again, very early in the year, and they could tip back in, but just where we are in terms of our planning for the coastal monitoring program, the year strategy, and we did start that last week, losing track in terms of that early discussion and workshop on that. So we'll see how we track as the year progresses. And then public transport services is tipped into yellow, and understand that there are punctuality issues because of all the roadworks in and around the bus hub affecting timetables, and that's part of trying to run a bus network with a central city upgrade going on. But again, those measures can change as the year progresses, and we'll continue to provide this report and flag any changes from the month before or any risks in terms of our levels of service. And then the last thing in there is the reform update, with probably the key thing there being the NBEA is now in effect, and there was some day 1 requirements for continuing compliance enforcement, which we have been managing at a staff level. Not too much else to report in the reform space at the moment. So happy to take any questions.
Councillor Mepham.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. It's a good report. It's nice to see this all happening. So just in terms of the funding, the finance report, I just noticed, and it may be covered through timing differences, I'm not sure, but we're seeing interest and investment income of 1.3 million for the year-to-date 2 months, 1399, and we're seeing costs of 1542, 1.542 million. Now, my understanding is that that is all related to Port Otago loans. I would think that we would need to be seeing the same on both sides, income and cost. And now it could be explained by a timing difference, but if you could just take that back to Nick and ask what's going on with that, that would be useful. And I just also want to note that we are looking at a 199 deficit so far for the first 2 months of this financial year. So that's just noted. So thanks for bringing this information through to us. Yeah, so that was all I wanted to mention there. In your milestone reports, the coastal plan, what is there anything further you can say about that?
Right, we've got the right one, implementation of the regional coastal plan. So as I understand it, and Anita can correct me if I'm wrong, there's an RFP required to commence that process. And so that tender process has been delayed just in terms of getting it out to market, which may or may not impact our ability to deliver on that final measure, which is the annual program completed and reported to council. But at this early stage, because of the delay in the RFP, it seems prudent to just flag it as a risk and make sure we monitor it through the year. And Sam and Tom can come back and provide an update once they've progressed the RFP.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, Councillor Scott?
Is there any public understanding, Richard, in terms of the marine reserves, when that will come to a conclusion? Like at one point we were one step, but there's no indication of when that's going to be wrapped up.
So we have no role in that. It was determined.
No.
And it was also, any discussion on that would not have been in a public forum, so I'm not prepared to get into that.
Okay. Fair enough. I'm led to ask.
Well, anyway, yep.
I get struck by lightning.
Councillor Wilson.
The bus one is an interesting problem, and I understand, especially with the hospital, there's going to be roadworks for some time. Have we thought that some routes maybe looking at a different bus hub point for some services in order to take some of that traffic out? Has that been?
Not to my knowledge. The bus hub is still used as the point to run all buses through and enable transfers, and I think that I know that our team work closely with DCC around roadworks and alternative routes and the best way possible to manage that. But it's just a challenge that we will be managing for the foreseeable future. So I think the hub as a model and consistency around the use of the hub is important, noting that it may lead to delays from time to time, but consistency rather than jumping back and forth and responding to delays in roadworks is a risk.
And certainly I was in a car park trying to get out the other day, and the only traffic moving was buses, walkers and bikers. And it did make me think that we should be calling out to people to try and use the bus rather than cars in the CBD. In order to move, and maybe having some options in there as short-term solutions may encourage that better. So,
Okay, thank you. Now, sorry, Councillor Malcolm.
Well, on page 37, under emergency management, you're at green. But we're saying reporting not available, assume green.
Yes, so because again, and this is where the timing comes in. So the final reports for completion of service levels came into staff just after the agenda closed. So based on the information we'd had from the previous month's managers reporting, we're comfortable that was green, but there was still, it's just flagging, there was still some reporting to be received, and that will be reflected in next month's service measures.
Right. So just in light, probably just to follow up there, in light of what we're reading and hearing about what happened in Cyclone Gabriel, and certainly in the Hawke's Bay area, can we actually confirm that that we are emergency ready communication wise, and that what have we learned from what happened up there, and what are we trying to learn from what's happening up there?
Yep. So there was a lot of learnings, and there's still a review underway of the Cyclone Gabriel and the response that we will be reported obviously back nationally through NEMA and take any learnings from that. In terms of communication radio, I can't speak to the detail, but I do know there's been significant investment in satellite technology to give alternative communication channels and make sure they're available within Otago. So the team have been looking at that in the absence of cell and others, that we have satellite links available for key communication. So look, I think we reported to the, there's a the joint committee is tomorrow with papers which address readiness and the training and the work that's been done to ensure communities are ready in the event of an emergency. So I know all of those papers are made public after the meetings and can be viewed. So I can share the link to those, because that will give a good idea of where the civil defence function is at in terms of that planning.
Good, thank you.
Also, we'll start to discuss ideas for LTP planning for councils as well through that meeting tomorrow. So potential for further work in that space as well would be my takeaway from what we'll be hearing tomorrow too. Thank you. Anyone else? No more questions on Chief Executive's report then. It is for noting, so somebody care to do that? Councillor Wilson, seconded Councillor Forbes. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. And on to 10.2, which is Otago Regional Council appointments to the DC or Dunedin City Future Development Strategy Joint Hearings. Did I miss something? Oh, sorry, I did miss something. I did too. What have I got there as 10.1? 10.1 is the 6 monthly report to the Minister, which we do not want to miss. So this time I have, sorry, whoever came forward for the other one, we have, at least we're all here ready to go. 6 monthly report to the Minister, which is a requirement for this council, and looks as though we are on track, which is great. Anything of note?
No, I think it speaks for itself. We're pretty used to writing these now.
Thank you very much for all of the time it has taken to collate that. It's really useful. Any questions? Oh, Councillor Lawless.
The question is, do we need to do these after the election? And I ask that, it's not a stupid question. It is because this was fundamentally a very significant interest that the Minister of Environment, David Parker, had in our process. And he had a personal relationship, which he explained to us, with Manuhira Kia. And as a result of that, Mr. Skelton came in and said, blah, blah, blah. Now, we've done everything right subsequently to that, and it's been a useful process for us, I imagine, in some ways, just to an overview and things like that. We are the only regional council in New Zealand that are doing this, just quietly. And it does take a lot of time to, in actual fact, collate them and go through it, which we are already facing significant pressures and workloads and things like that within the body. And can I just suggest to everybody, without trying to make any political points at all, if there's a change of government, which appears likely to be in a month's time, there'll be a new Minister for the Environment. And I think it's fair for us to inquire of the incoming Minister whether or not this process is still required from the ORC. And I just think that I'd like to flag that with you, Madam Chair, and with the Chief Executive, Richard. It would be quite nice to get that directive prior to actually having to do the next one. Can you just ask us, do we need to carry on doing this? Because of the time exigencies and the staff time, etc. involved. Is that a reasonable?
It's just, I guess the other question would be, well, there's probably only one more of these until notification, and just whether there is a massive amount of work that goes into this, or actually we have a whole lot of internal reporting processes that we do that are quite helpful. I hear what you're saying though. Do we need to do something just we don't know yet. We don't know until elections. But also, is it a whole lot of extra work to do that?
Look, I think there will be a number of conversations with MFE staff on a range of things post results. And one of them will be the commitments, the existing commitments we have with MFE, where do they stand? And so that's conversations we will be having with MFE staff, and for them to give us some direction on what the expectations of the minister would be. So I think, Michael, I'm comfortable that we ask that question.
Yep.
Because we'll do it. There will be a range of things that either the regional sector are doing or ORC are doing specifically that we would want to test with MFE staff and the minister.
They're not overly onerous to.
No, that's
pull
fine.
together,
We
though.
are the only regional council. I asked of other regional councils, they're not required to do this.
No, this is a direct result of the ministerial investigation.
Exactly. And that's why, and it was it's to the minister, it's not to MFE. So that's, Richard, I'm reassured that you'll ask that question should need arise.
Thank you.
Can I just say that I actually find this report one of the most useful reports of all the reports we get. And I read it and I go, oh, is that what's happening? Oh, is that what we've got a shortage of stuff? Oh, is that what the critical areas are? I know the other reports with all the orange and the red and the green and if you're colourblind, it's a bit of a problem. But can I just say, even if the minister says no, that we should maybe just have a little bit of a conversation about this report, because I find it particularly useful. I don't want to, anyway, other councillors may agree, or there may be, you might find it, how often do we do this?
6 months. Yeah,
so you might find it's just part of that. We do it annually or something like that.
Sorry, I'm trying not to laugh, but we have only one more of these to go because we're notifying mid next year.
We're going to shut the door and say we're closed side. We're going to have a continual work program and so
yes,
forth.
That's why I was responding to council laws as I was before, that we have a really robust internal project management and reporting framework, which is where I was going with. Actually, it's not all that much onerous to pull that together and then put that forward. So regardless of whether we're doing this, we are doing a reporting to ourselves, and Land and Water Governance Group are the first point of call for seeing that, but also Chief Executive reports to us through his reporting too. So yeah, you're right, Councillor Scott, that happens and it's really useful. Yep, Councillor Wilson.
I'm going to try and make this into a question, which is I think what we need to be doing. But I am concerned about the statements here, and some of it is an interesting space. What I want to understand in this process, I am really aware, especially having been meeting in Oamaru Western the other day, the stress and pressure on staff at the moment, I think, has been substantially high, and for the last couple of years. What my focus is are your team well, and are you sure, despite the will and requirement of the minister, that if you needed to have an extension or extra time, that you would feel comfortable coming to us, especially given that the RPS decisions will not be out until March. And that is, for my issue is that we need to be looking after you guys and making sure that you can do it, and not rushing it to do something at the whim of a direction that tasks can't be achieved.
So through the chair, those are questions that happen weekly. Richard asks me, I check in with the team, the managers, and they check in. They are all well. They had a pretty stressful time leading up to getting ready for notification, and we are really focused on their well-being. We're not in a position where we need to apply for an extension, but if something happened, I would have that conversation with Richard.
Thank you, and that is, I think, our important role in this. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, we've come to the end of the questions, I think. So we've got recommendations here, noting the report, approving the 8th report, and noting that the next report will be March 2024. Okay, so we'll put all those then once we have somebody keen to move. Councillor Wilson, seconded Councillor Somerville. Yep, all in favour. Aye. Against. Carried. This time we're on to future development strategy. So we've got this report, which is around our joint responsibilities with Dunedin City under the future development strategy and appointment of a hearings panel. I'd just like to move from the chair the recommendations, but saying that the appointment be Councillor Wilson and Councillor Known, and that then signals that they could leave if they would like to, and anyone else who feels that they would like to be considered could as well. Is there a seconder though? Councillor Forbes. There is a seconder, Councillor Forbes, thank you. Okay, so sorry about that. It just, yeah, clears up the potential conflict of interest situation. Do you want to introduce the paper at all or take it as read?
Yes, I can.
Yep.
Thank you very much. This is the paper that is a follow-up to the paper that we presented to you in August, requesting a process for nominating the two ORC councillors onto the joint hearings panel. And I think the paper speaks for itself really. So really it's just a matter of you to continue this process.
Thank you very much.
Only thing I'd add to that is we had signalled the full membership paper would come back to October, just depending on finding a chair. It may be November, but it will be this year, but just a flag that if it's not October, we are still doing it, it's not be November.
So yeah, I have moved that we have Councillor Known and Councillor Wilson. The reason for that is because they are certified hearings commissioners. This is a relatively long and relatively complex hearing process. And these councillors have the experience that means that they would be good candidates, and also expressed an interest in being involved. So that is all that I wanted to say on that matter. Councillor Scott.
Yeah, cool. Look, it's great that Councillor Kate and Councillor Andrew have put their names forward. They're obviously got excellent experience and so forth. At one point, I had raised the concept of identifying others that would provide a bit of diversity on the hearing panel. I subsequently withdraw that. You know, I mean, and there was never any question about them to do the job, but I would, Madam Chair, appreciate some consideration in the future, some transparency around an expectation around the plans and what councillors have the skills and what councillors are getting the training and what councillors could potentially sit on different hearings, bearing in mind that for this one you don't actually have to be accredited, is my understanding. And there'll be a reason for that, because there was something like potentially how many on the hearing panel for this?
2 from DCC, 2 from us, and 2 from iwi, and an independent chair.
There's 7. So, and the diversity is that, not everybody needs to have the, the hearing per se, other attributes that equally be important. But as I said, I withdraw that. But Madam Chair, would you consider at some point, or the CE or whatever, just to put a thinking head on about that? One of the issues is, the RMA and the future of the RMA and the next act, how all that fits and whether councillors can be commissioners and all this type of stuff. But the great thing about the training is that you learn stuff that's directly applicable to what we do. And at some point, Andrew and Kate, won't be here. So who are the next young that actually have experience and so forth? Because I don't see that. I see a vacuum. Thank you. Will somebody follow that up? Yes. Thank you.
and important. Yep, sorry, I'll let other people speak. Councillor Malcolm.
Oh, it's just more on the financial considerations is probably, I assume that we have a budget figure in there somewhere now for these positions and for this process. But I'm just really more also interested in how we're actually rating for this, because I think it's only Queenstown and Dunedin that actually need to have this future direction strategy. So how are we rating our constituents?
So I can tell you that policy work is general rates funded.
And we have a budget line already.
We've got an urban work budget, yes.
Right. So it's just more about balancing the budget, whether because you're unclear how much that's going to cost at this stage and whether you think that's going to be within the parameters or do we need to.
So we have a consultants budget that sits in our urban work program. And at this stage, early in the year, it looks like it should be run. We've also been running under FTEs as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No. Okay. Got the recommendations there. I'll just make sure that nobody actually wants to speak because we had questioning and speaking then. Nobody would like to speak to the motion. Welcome to if you do. No. Okay, well, we've got the recommendations there. I will put them all in favour. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you.
Can I just inquire further on? The funding for this comes from the ORC, to pay the commissioners.
Joint.
Okay. Is it levied against the Dunedin ratepayers or across?
We just asked that.
Sorry,
sorry. Yeah, no, it's general rate. Yeah, what's the answer? Yeah. Thank you. Okay, right, we need to move on. We have, you were appointed, Councillor Wilson and Councillor Known.
Not after some debate. I have to say.
We were getting worried.
They're very, very close.
Yeah.
Down a casting vote.
Okay, we have recommendations then of committees, and subcommittees. Recommendation of the Audit and Risk Subcommittee, which was on the 22nd of June. Someone here to move that.
Can we, even though we've done it there, should we be moving that? I mean, I'm happy to move it. But is that I'm moving something that I moved at the Audit and Risk? So I'm happy to move that.
Okay. Yep, someone seconding it. Okay, the two chairs, thank you. Councillor Malcolm and Councillor Mepham. All in favour? Aye. Against, carried.
Yeah.
Recommendations of Environmental Implementation Committee. Councillor McCall, seconded. Someone, Councillor Wilson, all in favour? Aye. Against, carried. Next one is recommendations of Environmental Science and Policy Committee. Councillor Wilson, seconded Councillor McCall, all in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Against, carried. 10.4 recommendations of Public and Active Transport Committee.
Move.
Yep, moved Councillor Known, seconded Councillor Ware. All. A question. Sorry. Yep.
I asked a question, I guess that's the next couple of days ago as well, around the moving seconder there. Because that wasn't, that wasn't actually moved by Andrew and I. We moved the one before it in the last meeting, and that is somewhat reflected in the.
Which one is it? Sorry, Councillor.
8.2.
8.2, yeah.
Yeah, request around, I think that was that was Michael that moved that one.
Oh yeah, that's right. Good spotting. Exactly. Yeah. So we just need to double check.
Yeah, we need to make an amendment to the minutes, which I haven't got to, and I'll send them around again.
Yeah, there was also a question around the one before inviting Edward Ellis, and I think there was some discussion around making that not a specific name, but I can't remember what we
Yeah, I'll definitely look into it for you. Thank you.
It's that one before, that's right, because the second name.
Oh, okay. That was, yeah, cool. No, that's right.
Just check, so we can approve the
late.
resolutions, but we need to change who moves and second them now to be able to do that.
It was either
Can we lay it on
Gary
the table for
or
next time? Probably.
Kevin seconded Michael's motion, I thought.
The Lakes one.
No, the
Writing to government about Queenstown funding.
Public and
second
the
that,
transport committee we're on.
So it's Michael and Kevin.
Yeah, because we haven't actually approved these minutes.
No, that's correct.
And then next.
No, we're adopting the recommendations right now. Yeah.
The minutes of each of those meetings.
Sorry, Amanda. Yep.
Just to address Councillor Ware's point about the fact that the minutes haven't been adopted. So what we've been doing, we're just transitioning to this approach, is putting the draft minutes in a folder in Diligent. And the draft minutes also go up on the website before, because we've got 3 monthly gap between committees. If we waited for 3 months and then brought these recommendations, it's quite a time lag. So we're working on the basis that the draft minutes are available. They've already been checked by the co-chairs. Then they go up on the website, they go in the draft folder, so all councillors have access to them, and then the recommendations come to council. So it's not a perfect system, but I guess as you know, it's what we're working with at the moment based on the delegations for those committees.
Yeah, and we can retroactively go back and.
There's a question. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about the relevance of this recommendation after speaking with the member of Queenstown through that
We've already
video
done
he
it.
had.
Yeah.
And where he was sort of saying, well, it's nice that you're paying attention to what's happening up here, but we're not really that interested in being a tier 1 town city.
Yeah. So we have written that letter, it's gone away, and it was done hand in hand with QLDC. So they saw what we were writing and were happy with it, which was, the letters actually, you've had it at the last meeting.
Access to public transport funding that is available to tier 1s, but not being defined as a tier 1.
Oh, yeah,
because it brings in a number of urban development.
Yeah, that's right.
As the mayor said. So as Gretchen said, we did act on the resolution as it was made and passed. But obviously there was also some conversations after the fact just around the issue.
Yep, so that's been done. Councillor Ware.
Sorry, I just want to understand this properly.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
Annoying, but if the committees don't have the delegation, and so it has to come to full council, like to approve this motion, were we supposed to go and act on it before then?
This is the issue we've got where our committees have no delegation.
Yeah.
So if that was the case, we'd be doing nothing for months at a time. So we have a resolution on the table to review our committees and delegations that was made by the council when we set them in November last year. And that's one of the open questions, I guess, to come back and just understand if the existing delegations allow us to function lawfully and actually carry out our work program.
It's a good question. Yeah, thank you. Right, so anyway, very good questioning today. We have managed to ascertain that the mover was Councillor Laws, seconded Councillor Malcolm. And this 8.6, that one was all okay, wasn't it? That one was accurate. So as we have just done, we are going to now approve or not the recommendations. So all in favour, aye, against, carried. Thank you. Oh, maybe I was getting confused.
I know, maybe.
Councillor Wilson and Councillor Forbes.
Is that for the regional transport? Just to confirm. No, I'm standing.
Yes, I'll move those.
Yeah. We've already done that, right.
Second of the regional transport.
I'll second it.
Yes, sorry, that one isn't labelled in mine. So we got, the regional land. Oh, I haven't got the heading for it, sorry. So
this is the resolution for the Otago Regional Transport Committee.
Apologies. Yeah, get out of here.
Yeah, come on.
Sit down and behave yourself.
Sitting down.
This is the highlight of the meeting. Yep.
I'm moving.
Yeah.
Interest.
Regional Land Transport Committee. Seconded Councillor Weir. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. All right, now we're at moving into public excluded, and we added an additional matter earlier on in the meeting. The table there for the reasons for exclusion are there. So does somebody care to move?
Can I ask a question first? And it's in the minutes of the last meeting. All of the correspondence, I think, is now been made public. And I'm just wondering whether that those minutes. So once we've confirmed them, it's part of the motion that we make the minutes public. That's the one on these 4 plain letters. Because I think some of that is now public. And so I'm just wondering, can we confirm them in public or confirm them in public excluded and then make them public?
I think it would be easier to move into public excluded and confirm them, and then just noting resolution to release them following that, just for administrative ease, because they're currently in public excluded. If we
Thank you. Okay, and that's just want to raise it. Thank you.
Councillor Laws.
There are some times, I mean, you know how I feel about the general principle, but there are times in which people have said to me, oh, well, we're going into SANS, we'll just decide this and blah, 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 and then we'll release the minutes later on. And I don't see those minutes that are publicly excluded being made public. And I just want to pick you up on that and say, there's a deal here, and the deal is once the moment for reason for exclusion has disappeared, then those publicly excluded minutes need to be in public. Now, it doesn't need a formal resolution, but it just needs the chief executive to go,
Yeah,
just saying,
that's a good point to note. Yep.
Like, this is a very good one. The Catlins one is a very good example of that. The reason you're going in is because you've got people who are going to be appointed or not. But once that's made, well, off you go. You know, that should be made public.
Yep. Agree with that. Yep.
And we inform the people.
Yep. Good one.
Just inform them first, probably.
That's a general point, though, wasn't it? Council Laws. Yep.
Yeah.
Where the reason to withhold no longer exists, then you will release. Yep. Okay. So, no, we're about to do that. We're about to move that the public be excluded from the following parts of the proceedings: confidential minutes, integrated catchment management, community connect, concession for Queenstown Ferry service, procurement of fleet tracking for the reasons outlined in the table. So I'm moving that. Somebody seconding. Councillor Noon. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you.